Untamed is going to be untamed. It's going to be a little crazy. I want to talk to my people. I want to talk to my brothers and sisters. We can have grace and humility in how we interact with other people.
Oh, hot dog, look at you.
And nobody talked about what's really happening.
And let's have conversations about what truth is. So welcome back. It's a big Monday. And it is a really, really big Monday. We have some great guests that were going to be joining us. We have Jeff Nyquist, I think I said that right, and Mark Cook. And we're going to talk about some global threats. And I'll tell you a little bit about our guests because they're here. I'm not going to waste a whole lot of time. I'm going to bring them in. But on Friday, I finished a 5-month project. I've been telling you guys about this document. And I was like, okay, well, I think this document I need to take the emotion out of it. And so we'll put it all in the comments so you can look at it, and we'll continue to kind of come back to it. I know Mark had a couple things that he had to say about me calling out Eric Coomer specifically. But let's do this. Let me tell you about who the guest is first. So Jeff is a fearless geopolitical analyst who unmasks the coordinated threats from Russia, China, and North Korea. He's going to unpack a whole lot today. We're going to look at China supporting Russia and North Korea, sending troops to support Russia in their war with Ukraine. And this is a good conversation because I am standing on the side of Russia. Personally, I am. I don't know about I know a lot more about the area. So we're going to have some good conversations about this specifically. Because I know too much about Ukraine. Matter of fact, I know too much about the elections and how they stole elections dating back to 2014 in the Maidan coup, in what can only be described as us stealing the sovereignty of yet another nation. So we're going to talk about, he has a blunt, unflinching geopolitical analysis of things. And so it'll be good. It'll be a good conversation for us to have. And he's also the author of several books. So we'll talk a little bit about those as well. The Origins of the Fourth World War. I ordered that today. My books are stacking up because I have a lot of guys that I've had on that I think are brilliant. And I haven't agreed with everyone, by the way, but I still had to have the conversation. And then we're going to have Mark Cook join us. And we're going to talk about my analysis that I put out. It's been 5 years coming. And the only reason, by the way, I did not actually do it sooner is I thought there had to be someone smarter than me, more qualified than me. They would go through and put all the dots together. But then over 5 years, that never happened. People would talk about it. I think the closest we came was Dave Clements putting out the movie about how the election was stolen. And it focused directly on Dominion voting systems and Eric Coomer. But it's been a tough 5 years. I have a $90,761, I think, that's due today. In a case that I was not even a party to, because they want me to give up my rights as an American, because the system is just wholly corrupt. And you can say whatever you want, but I'm going to tell you right now, I'm a journalist. I've been doing this for way longer since 2012. And I've advocated for people all over the country. And I've had some significant success stories of publishing things that led to light being shined on things. I did so from the place of, I didn't care what side of the aisle you were on. I just wanted to do what was right for the American people, such as the gun running that was done by Obama and Eric Holder, Fast and Furious, and some of the other really bad things have been done around the country on both sides of the aisle. So I'm not going to wait any longer. We're going to bring our guest on, and we'll kind of walk through some things with him. It'll be an interesting conversation about Ukraine and Russia. That's going to be great. So, Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Tommy says that you are a walking encyclopedia, and I am really excited about that. So I get to interview you, but also learn something from you. And I just ordered your book.
Yeah. Oh, you did? Which one?
Yeah. The war, the one that
Origins of the Fourth World War.
Yeah, Origins of the Fourth World War. Yeah, well, yes.
That's my workbook. I wrote that when I figured out the larger architecture that we were going to pass through. It was written. It was published in 1998, 99, and I had I'd done something nobody really among scholars. I was originally a political scientist at UC Irvine, and getting my PhD, and I went through the defector literature, and everybody
Okay.
said, "Oh, you don't look at defectors; they're traitors. You can't trust them." Well, how are you going to know what's going on inside of a secretive system like the Soviet system unless you talk to or read the testimony of the people that were there? You can sort it.
Yeah, the
as
echo
best
chamber
you
doesn't
can.
work. That theory doesn't work.
Right. No. And what I discovered is, yeah, there's an echo chamber. And if a defector comes and says what we don't want to hear, we say he's a false defector. But if it's what we want to hear, he's a good defector. And this is what happened with a guy named Golitsyn, Anatoly Golitsyn. He ended up being the bad guy of all the defectors, and there's a massive body of books and literature saying he's a paranoid, he's insane, he's crazy, he's got this giant. But Golitsyn wrote a book in 1984 called New Lies for Old, in which he predicted that the next Soviet leader was going to be a Soviet type Dubček, a liberalizer, but it was going to be a false liberalization under the KGB, and that the Soviet Union was going to fall apart, that the Communist Party was going to give up power in the Soviet Union. In fact, he made something like 139 falsifiable predictions in his book, and that's according to Mark Riebling, who went through the book when he wrote his book, A Wedge. And by 1994, about 94% of these predictions came true. And in the midst of them coming true, there was a giant attack on Golitsyn's reputation in the American and British press. Massive attack. His name was ran through the mud, him and the former head of CIA counterintelligence who believed in him, James Angleton. And they like to say James Jesus Angleton. His mother was Mexican, but they always use Jesus. He never used that. That's just to ridicule him. That's why they say that. And so these guys, their reputations were destroyed. Why? Because I think Golitsyn was the key. And everybody said, well, Golitsyn's the only one that said they were going to have a fake collapse of the communist bloc. No, he wasn't. Jan Shena, the highest level political defector from the Soviet bloc, he was a Czech general who was in charge of, he was the commissar over their military. He defected in 1968, and he wrote a book in 1982 saying they were going to fake the collapse of the Warsaw Pact Communist Alliance. And there was Adolf Bittman who said the same thing in different venues. These guys were threatened, intimidated, their names were blackened. And then I've talked to numerous other people from the former Soviet Union who've told me the same story, only they weren't as famous enough that anyone would care what they said.
Okay, so let me ask you a question about that. So this is important because I saw this happen largely in the Middle East, where you had, and I'm not doubting what you're saying, because obviously if you were to ask me about tech, I would tell you about tech and you would be like, okay. And you'd have questions about it. And I'd be like, no, that's not how it works, because I'm an expert in that field. I'm a system architect. When it comes to history, especially like this, I'm not questioning you. So, and I've never interviewed you before, so I don't want to offend you by saying this. But
no, it's okay. People always say I'm crazy. It's okay.
No, I do not think you're crazy, right? And I think that you started off with the fact that dismissive discord, right? Mm-hmm. Anytime that there's something they wanted to go to slander, I know that for a fact. That's just the way they operate. Yeah. But is it possible in this case that there was indications that there was leading up to a collapse, and therefore there was a narrative set that, hey, they're not really going to collapse. It's just going to be for show. And so you were playing, it's almost like a volleying the ball 3 times, right? Collapse, not collapse, collapse. And then
nobody believed this collapse. It's interesting. I had Robert Bukar, who is a Czech film producer. He made a film on how the Czech Velvet Revolution was ordered from Moscow, and he interviewed former STB officials who were ordered to orchestrate that revolution, and that Václav Havel was the KGB's guy to Havel to the castle. And so he made this documentary, and I helped him with his book. He came to see me when he wanted to do it, and I helped connect him with some defectors and former KGB people. And but he knew in 1978 he worked. He was a defector himself. He worked for the office of the Czech president, and he said it was common knowledge that they were going to change the system and liberalize it, and
Yeah.
that orders were coming from Moscow. And so I got him I got him a meeting with former CIA director Robert Gates, who I'd made connections at. He was at Texas A&M. He was the head of Texas A&M then. This is what, 15, 20 years ago. Wow. And so he had lunch with Gates, and he had also had the lunch with the former head of CIA counterintelligence, and he told him what he knew as working in the Czech. And this former head of CIA counterintelligence was working in Prague at the time. And he said, "Well, you knew this in 78, right?" And the former head of CIA counterintelligence said, "We never knew that." And Robert was shocked. And it's because when you look at the KGB and the GRU were the best intelligence services in the world. It's not that they didn't make mistakes, and people love to point to their mistakes. All intelligence operations involve mistakes, and there were plenty of mistakes in their collapse of the Soviet Union. They almost lost for real in trying this harebrained scheme. But they do things that our intelligence services can't do, and they penetrated our services. This was the big attack on Glitzen and Angleton, that they were paranoid that the CIA and American intelligence had been penetrated. Well, I think we're over that by now, because Aldrich Ames, who was the main guy watching the Soviet bloc for the CIA from 1984 to 94 when they caught him, he was working for the KGB. He walked into the Soviet embassy and volunteered. And then you had Robert Hansen at the FBI. Again, the guy responsible for watching Russia. He started spying for the GRU, I think in 78 or 79. They finally arrested him in 2001. There's been a number of movies made about Robert Hansen. So we were penetrated. And by the way, these aren't the only penetrations. These are the ones.
Do you know how they caught Robert Hansen?
I think that there's an intimation.
They ran the math on him. Nobody, they ran the math. Yeah. So it was basically, they caught him based on the probability of him being involved in so many different things and things being
because of the connections leaked. Of what he knew.
Yeah.
And what he had access to. That makes sense. The computers are getting better. It was in some of the biographies of Hansen, they suggested that maybe the Russians gave him away to protect someone larger in the organization. But it's then you go to our politics. Our politicians are much more vulnerable. You go to the Clintons' background, Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton worked for a Soviet KGB-controlled anti-war organization when he was a Rhodes Scholar in the UK in 1969. In 1969, December, he went to Moscow. After that, he went to Prague. And there's stories, and I have documents from people that know about this, that he made contact with East Bloc intelligence when he was back there. Now, I can't prove that. So I don't know for sure, but these allegations have been made. And there's been no real accounting for Clinton, going behind the Iron Curtain in winter time. Going to Moscow in December is not like the tourist time to go. Very strange. And then, of course, Clinton's, the Clintons both had a lot of very left-wing connections. And then there's Terry Reid's book, which is called Compromised, Bush, Clinton, the CIA, about how the Contra supply operation through the CIA, moving weapons from Arkansas through Mexico City to the Contras, which was run at one point by Felix Rodriguez. The allegation that Felix Rodriguez was a double agent working for the KGB, and that he had dirtied up murdered other KGB, other CIA officers that wouldn't participate in smuggling drugs from the red cocaine cartel back up through from Panama back into the U.S., into Arkansas. And Clinton, as governor of Arkansas at the time, was cooperating with Bill Casey, the head of the CIA at the time, in this, and there was some kind of money laundering going on. And Terry Reid's book had explosive allegations, but it's funny how it got buried. And a journalist friend of mine contacted Reid several years ago to say, with all this stuff that was going on with Trump, the Trump Russia stuff and everything. And Terry Reid was so frightened. He said, "I'm amazed they didn't kill me. I'm staying quiet." So I think the CIA has been penetrated. I think money laundering, drugs. I think pedophile rings. I don't think Epstein was a Mossad. I think he was connected to Russian networks, and I'll stick by that. That's my opinion. I don't know for sure. Look at Ghislaine Maxwell. Look at who her father, Robert Maxwell, was. It has been alleged in books that are coming out now that he set up front companies for the KGB and the Soviet Union in the United States, and he died shortly after the fall of the Soviet Union. But certainly his daughters would have had control of these companies. Were laundering Soviet and then Russian Federation money coming from the KGB and the Communist Party structures. So we one of the things, the fall of the Soviet Union, a former disgruntled KGB officer told me he was called to talk to General Shabarshin, who was the head of the KGB foreign, PGU, they called it. It's the first chief directorate, and he was asked about this business of the banks in Austria for moving Communist Party money into the West. And this KGB guy asked him, he said, with the fall of the Soviet Union, are we in trouble? With all these things that are happening, are we doomed? And he said, well, we've had some setbacks, but everything's on track. Now we can start moving money into the West and acquiring interest in companies in the West and buying people in the West. Because once you believe the Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore, they have a free hand to become partners, quote unquote, with people who they can then leverage.
Well, I mean, let's go back in time. You remember, one of our biggest allies in World War II was Russia, right? And they, if you want to take statistically, they lost more people in Russia in this war than any other country at all. And it's predicted between 30 and 50 million people they lost during that war. So huge numbers, right?
And of course, it was Stalin that brought the war on by aligning with Hitler in August 1939, unleashing Hitler on the West. And he partitioned Poland with Hitler, and he invaded Finland, which he backed off on when the United States Roosevelt administration got angry with him. But basically, a very aggressive dictator, Stalin.
But even if you look back at the United States and what they knew, even with Pearl Harbor, they had intimate knowledge of what was going to happen, and we're actually told about the attack prior to the attack happening, and failed to even notify anyone on the ground at Pearl Harbor of the incoming attack. They knew. They were told.
Let me tell you an interesting story, and this is something that Senator, very unpopular Senator Joseph McCarthy discovered, and it's in his book Retreat from Victory, because he went after General George Marshall on this. The Pearl Harbor thing, it looks like, I mean, there's a lot of complexities here, but it looks like Harry Hopkins in the White House. Now, I strongly suspect that Harry Hopkins was a Soviet agent. Many people do believe that. And he was like a co-president. He lived in the White House with FDR. He was very influencing him. He would make these trips to the Soviet Union. He was sort of a fundamental person for Franklin Roosevelt. And of course, it appears that they knew they had some kind of signals. They had some kind of notion what Japan was going to do. Maybe not that it would be a successful attack on the battleships, but remember, there was a war warning. They were expecting war with Japan because of the embargo, which another book shows another Soviet agent, a deputy treasury secretary.
There's a book called Theater of War, I think, and it talks about how there was people on all sides were basically sharing information in order to say this is incoming, this is going to happen. Even the Battle of Normandy.
Yeah, Harry Dexter White. Yeah, now I'd be interested in that, because I've got some curious things. But Harry Dexter White was really running Treasury, and he wrote a cable. Now they call it Operation Snow. He met with the head of Soviet intelligence to make this Operation Snow, and it was to provoke a war between Japan and the United States. If White could just frame this telegraph to humiliate the Japanese and put it in a way that Japan really, the balance of decision in Japan would be for war against the United States. Because remember, Germany had invaded the Soviet Union. Japan had an army in Manchuria. It could have invaded the Soviet Union too. And the Russians were very afraid of that. And the Battle of Moscow was coming. And Stalin was going to need the troops in the Far East that are watching the Japanese to pull back. So this was where the context of Operation. So, but the Roosevelt administration was larded with Soviet agents. And anyway, one of the big stories was that George Marshall lied. And we know this is a fact. He admitted later he lied. He lied about where he was on the morning of Pearl Harbor because there was a colonel from military intelligence who had figured out that the Japanese cipher going out indicated they were going to go to war somewhere around 7 a.m. 7:30 a.m. Hawaii time, right? Which was in Washington, D.C., it was close to around noon time. So he was trying to find General Marshall, and Marshall claimed he was horseback riding, right? He couldn't find him for the longest time. So the message to Himmel and Short, the commanders in Hawaii, came late. And it came by Western Union because their communication system didn't work. But it came out later. McCarthy found out where General Marshall was. He was, at that moment, he wasn't riding horseback. And then he lied again to Congress in December of 1945 when they reopened hearings again. He said he was with his wife, which of course wasn't true. He was meeting Soviet Ambassador Litvinov, who was arriving that morning from the Soviet Union in Washington.
All right, so let's back it up. Victory, history is written by the victors, and that's whoever gets to the book first, I guess you could say it, because there's been the things that have come out on both sides. The thing that I find very troubling is the catalyst to war with the United States and Japan, and by the way, I'm a walking dictionary of worthless information typically. Not of information like this, but I have a deep, love for history, especially when it comes to wars and the art of war. And so, but the catalyst to get us into the war was one thing. Yeah. But the catalyst to get us out of the war and stop the war was the exclamation point was obviously Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? So those two led as an example. I'm just trying to, in my brain, figure out with all of the antagonists that the United States had in war, why we chose Japan over, because Japan had already lost several battles in the Pacific, right? They had I forgot, man, now I wish I could remember that, but they had a massive battle that we defeated their battleships.
Well, Midway, destroyed their aircraft carrier fleet. They were trying to invade Alaska and Midway Island.
So, I kind of look at it and I go, well, Russia, what caused Russia to not be our friend? And could you argue that the relationship they have with China, and by the way, we have a very difficult relationship with China too. The United States has you could argue that the number of Judases that we have in the United States today would rival anything that they had of Soviets inside of our leadership dating back to the 40s, 50s, and 60s, right?
Yeah.
So you look at it now, and China owns large swaths of lands right next to bases that had to be approved. You can look at their involvement in our tech infrastructure, even how we do contracts related to critical infrastructure. Many of those contracts end up with Chinese companies because they qualify for being minority under what's called the 8A program on GSAs. So, so how do we square the fact, and I want to take it back to this, and maybe I'm looking at it differently, but it's like being in a schoolyard, right? And then the friend of my enemy or the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And I only say this because when I was in the Middle East, I would go to Sudan, and Sudan had natural enemies, most of which was the United States and the West. And then they had people that they were friendly with. But then I would go meet with those friendlies, and they had an adverse relationship with Sudan as well. And then you meet with other countries, and they were friendly with them, but that's not the narrative that you heard in the media, is that they weren't friendly. So
that's right.
It's like a bunch of soup salad.
Well, it's very interesting. And it's Asian politics. There's something called the scissors strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And the scissors strategy, it's very dialectical. It's when you can control, you want there to be conflicts, or you want to take conflicts that are pre-existing, ethnic conflicts, religious conflicts, and you want to infiltrate both sides in that conflict. And you have intelligence on, and it could be a conflict totally unrelated to your direct interest, but you can end up getting your agents, like, let's say it's Protestantism and Catholicism, right? They had the Wars of Reformation. You infiltrate both,
Yeah.
and then you pass information to your agents on the one side from the other, and then they end up being the guys that know all the important stuff, and they get promoted. So your agents get promoted by this process, and you end up getting more and more control dialectically over the conflict so that you can make it work to your advantage and the advantage of your country. A good example.
Chaos
India
favors the op, not the people, right?
Yeah, well, conflict, it's exploitation of conflict. And a good example is India and Pakistan, where you have China backing Pakistan, the Soviet Union backing India. Now, what Golitsyn said about this, the defector, he said the Sino-Soviet split is a fraud. And there's a guy named Nevin Gusak who wrote a book called Was Golitsyn Right, I think is the title of the book. And he, thousands of footnotes, he showed that the Soviet Union and China were cooperating the whole time. They were supposedly at each other's throats. Only they were hiding this level of cooperation, and that the Sino-Soviet split was a trick. It was the most. It was exaggerated, and the GRU defector, Colonel Stanislav Lunev, when he came over, I asked him. I said, "Well, did you see any evidence?" He worked in China. He spoke Mandarin, and I said, "Did you ever see any evidence that Russia and China were secretly allied when they were supposed to be enemies?" And he said, "Yes." And then I asked him about the conspiracy and death of Lin Biao, which was a decisive event in China where Marshal Lin Biao, the head of the People's Liberation Army, allegedly tried to overthrow Mao with the connivance of the Soviet Union. He was supposedly conniving to make a fake border war with the Soviet Union, that Mao would then go into his bunker and he'd gas Mao in his bunker. Well, yeah, Lunev knew about this. Now, Lin Biao supposedly, when he got caught trying to do this, he fled in an aircraft with his immediate circle to the Soviet Union, and his aircraft was shot down over Mongolia by a Chinese interceptor. So he didn't get away. So his fleeing to the Soviet Union was kind of the proof that he was working with the Soviet Union. And remember, this happened weeks before before Kissinger was sent by Nixon to meet in China to set up the Nixon-Mao meetings, for the opening up of China. So this thing was now, it's very funny. Lin Biao was very ill. He's not the ill generals don't start coups normally. But I asked Colonel Lunev, what do you know about this? And he knew one of his mentors had been at the Lin Biao crash site in Mongolia. And he said everyone on that plane had been murdered before they were put on the plane. And
What?
that the plane was not shot down. The pilot crashed it in Mongolia, parachuted out, was picked up on the border and taken back to Beijing. And I asked Lunev, I said, well, since the whole world came to believe the Soviet Union had tried to overthrow Mao, or they were trying to convince American intelligence of this in advance of Kissinger's meeting, I said, what purpose did this serve? If the Soviet Union was being accused before the world of trying to overthrow Mao, why didn't they confess their innocence and show the evidence at the crash site that it was fabricated? And Lunev looked at me and he said, I'd never really thought about it before. But in other words, the Soviets were colluding with the Chinese to make it appear as though they were enemies of China in 1971, right? So that's, to me, the conspiracy and death of Lin Biao and Lunev's testimony. But that's not the only testimony. There's things in the Chinese defector's book about this, which I think he's a false defector. And I think the title of the book is The Conspiracy and Death of Lin Biao. There are inconsistencies in this story that make me believe it's a fabrication. And it is through false defectors and double agents that they feed us false information so that the true defectors are rebuked when they come and give us true information, because we're so larded with false information that we've already accepted. We won't accept true information no matter under any conditions. And an example of how good they were at doubling our agents back, that every agent we recruited in communist Cuba, it was discovered, was doubled back on us. We never had an authentic penetration agent in communist Cuba. Same thing in East Germany.
Well, most of the time Cuba was an interesting case study because he would just kill anyone that he thought was a double agent. So he killed a lot of innocent people. I mean,
Stalin did that too. Yeah.
I
Oh
mean,
no, they will do that. There's a thing called a dangle where you put somebody up and you get them recruited, you get them, but they're it's a setup the whole time.
yeah.
Yuri Inosenko, and I knew Pete Bagley a little bit. Pete Bagley was the CIA counterintelligence guy that recruited Yuri Inosenko. Yuri Inosenko was a defector who was used to discredit Golitsyn and Angleton. And Nosenko claimed that he had control of the Oswald file. So funny thing, he defects in 1964, early 64, after the JFK assassination. And his claim is that Oswald had nothing to do with Russian and Soviet intelligence. Well, we know from other defectors, like, for example, the late former head of the Romanian intelligence circle, intelligence agency, Ion Pacepa, Mike Pacepa, that there was a plot by Khrushchev to kill Kennedy, and that the president of Romania knew about it. The Romanian intelligence, at the top of Romanian intelligence, they knew about it, and that Cuba was involved. And you've got documentaries, you've got lots of evidence about this. And so you notice that everything the CIA does, I mean, everything the KGB does, the CIA is blamed for. So if the KGB kills, or the DGI, the East Bloc Intelligence Services, kill the president of the United States, everyone ends up believing the CIA did it. If the KGB, which is the biggest drug runners, the KGB and Chinese intelligence control probably 2/3 of the world's drug trade through their surrogates and their mafias. But everybody believes it's the CIA is the big drug trafficker, right? All intelligence services do some drug trafficking. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about that for a minute, because Afghanistan had some of the largest poppy fields ever in the history of the country.
Yeah. Why do you think the Soviets invaded Afghanistan to begin with?
Well, hold on a second. And when we were in there for 20 years, and during that time, the amount that became the epicenter that serviced almost 70-80% of the poppy that was being distributed around the world. In comes 2022. They close Afghanistan, right? Close the say, hey, we're leaving. The poppy population in the country of Afghanistan shrinks by 97%. Taliban comes in, burns out most of the fields, and turns them into agricultural projects.
I would want to know where you get the 97% figure from, because I'm very doubtful, because the Russian mafia, Afghanistan is a war that nobody really understands because they didn't bother talking to the people there. You know that
that's a hubris problem we face for
it's our intelligence is terrible. Look, when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, my friend Trevor Loudon knew a New Zealand agent. Yeah, I knew a New Zealand agent that infiltrated the communist movement, ended up in Moscow being trained. And he was told in Moscow, this guy, that they had invaded Afghanistan on purpose to lose the war. Now, they wanted to cultivate the poppies. It's the Soviets that did this. And if you read Milt Bearden's book, he was the guy who was charged in the Reagan administration for getting weapons and support to the Mujahideen who were fighting the Soviets. And what you find out is that Ahmad Shah Massoud, he was a Tajik, ethnic Tajik in Afghanistan. He was under the influence of a Soviet agent codenamed the Advisor, according to Bearden, and that his victories against the Russians were sort of fabricated. They weren't real. And you have Rashid Dostum, who is an Uzbek. See, you have Pashtuns, Uzbeks, and Tajiks ethnically in Afghanistan. And you have this thing called Uzbek USSR and Tajikistan USSR, right? Uzbekistan. And these guys, the Uzbek and the Tajik KGB, were all over Afghanistan, sending people in there like Rashid Dostum and supporting Massoud. And what's interesting is that his deputy, his intelligence chief of Massoud, was a guy named Mohammed Fahim. Now, Massoud was assassinated just before 9/11. Remember that? He was blown up while doing an interview.
Yeah.
It was a bomb on one of these journalists interviewing him. Who takes over the Northern Alliance? Mohammed Fahim. Mohammed Fahim, there have been accusations that Mohammed Fahim was trained in Soviet Tajikistan as a KGB officer. And so you had the KGB was controlling the Northern Alliance before we went in. Now, who becomes defense minister of Afghanistan ultimately when we go into Afghanistan? Mohammed Fahim. The defense minister is a KGB agent. So Mohammed Karzai, the president that we put in Afghanistan, and this is in Robert Gates, the former defense secretary, then under Bush, and is in his memoirs.
That's a whole different story.
Karzai kept Gates makes fun of Karzai in his memoirs because Karzai said, "I don't run Afghanistan. Mohammed Fahim runs Afghanistan," and he was all paranoid that Fahim was a Russian agent and that the Russians were really controlling everything in Afghanistan when we were occupying it. You see how this works? How this game works? And I think Syria might be the same deal.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you're looking at if you're talking about what's happening in Syria, there's no question. I don't believe that it has anything to do with Russia, but I think that who's been put in power, Shara in Syria is the same issue. But reverse. Yeah. You talk about the CIA being off the rails. It's almost a country all of its own. Like they have the ability to, and the substructure to do, to destroy the sovereignty of nations. I think probably all intelligence organizations that are worth anything do. But you talk about what the CIA has done, and you look at Syria and you look at Afghanistan today, or even Iraq is probably even a better example. And the resources that were taken out of that area. I spent 6.5 years in the Middle East and Africa, and I was in all sorts of areas. Mm-hmm. And places that I probably had no business being, and things that I had no business doing. But you got to see the long arm of foreign policy, not just from the United States, but even foreign policies from other countries and how they interacted in those environments. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you from being on the ground that the push-pull, the friction that gets created is, there's the policy that was created in Washington or created in Moscow, right? Those are one thing, or even created in China, wherever it's created in China. And then there's the on-the-ground influence, self-dealing that exists inside of these intelligence units, and it typically doesn't mesh with at least what public policy is.
Yeah, well, there's a book called Blowing My Cover written by Amy, I'm not remembering her last name. And her book, she was a CIA officer stationed to the former Yugoslavia. She knew these languages there, but she didn't like the CIA rules. So she basically lived in Bulgaria. She didn't even live in the country she was supposed to be living in, staying at her boyfriend's mother's house. And she got caught. And instead of being fired, they just slapped her on the wrist and you have to go there. And so she felt guilty. So she decided to do her job. So she ends up infiltrating these militias, and she finds out that they have this Al-Qaeda guy who's willing to work with the U.S. So she gives it to her boss and she says, "Look, I've got an Al-Qaeda. We can recruit somebody in Al-Qaeda." And her boss says, "Well, I don't know if Langley's going to go for this." Do you know this story? And so finally they get back, the top CI people, get on the horn with them and say, "Don't go anywhere near that person. We don't want you anywhere near Al-Qaeda people. It's too dangerous," right?
Yeah. This is a book by Lindsay Moran.
Lindsay, that's it. That's her. It's a fantastic read. She's a great writer. She's very talented, but she's telling the truth about how dysfunctional the CIA is. When Alexander Litvinenko went to defect, and he brought important information, by the way, that the Chechen wars, that this was a fabrication, that the war on Chechnya was a controlled operation, that the terror against Russians was false flag from the beginning. The first Chechen act of terrorism was blowing up a rail bridge on the Don River, and the guy accidentally blew himself up, and amongst the debris of his splattered corpse was his FSB identification card. So and that's in blowing up Russia that Litvinenko. But when Litvinenko went to try to defect, he wanted to go to defect to the United States first. We wouldn't take him. They rebuked him. He was actually in danger at that point, and if the British hadn't taken him in. So we make terrible mistakes, and it was Litvinenko that was murdered with polonium 210. They put it in his tea in a hotel in London, and he died a horrible death of radiation poisoning. But it was Litvinenko who publicly said that Putin was behind Al-Qaeda, and that Ayman al-Zawahiri, they say, the number 2 guy in Al-Qaeda, was a longtime KGB agent. Go figure. So think about that. When you have a superior intelligence service, you're going to run circles around the CIA. Whatever damage the CIA does, and it does plenty, I'm sure.
So what do you think of common Russia? I mean, or recent Russia, the Putin's country, basically President Putin's country, versus Ukraine. I mean, if you're looking at this from and again, I know more about the Maidan coup of 14, the wars that lasted for nearly 8 years prior to the offensive conflict in 2022. The fact that Ukraine is largely known as probably one of the most corrupt nations. Anyone that's on the ground that spent any time
not as corrupt as Russia, and they've been reforming. You got to be careful about these narratives about the coup. You got to talk to a lot of people in the ground in Ukraine. Here's what happened, and you can go back and you can check these facts. Before the Winter Olympics in Sochi that year, Russia had Moscow had this plan. Ukraine was always the Achilles heel of the Soviet Union because the Ukrainians had been very badly persecuted. Stalin didn't trust them. There was a Ukraine famine. There was a lot of Ukrainians murdered through starvation and other means. When the officer purge happened in 1938 of the army, it was largely Ukrainian officers who were purged. And the Gulag was full of Ukrainians. Of the ethnic minorities of the Soviet Union, they were the largest one represented in the Gulag. So the Ukrainians have a good reason not to want to be part of this thing. And what happened is Russia is really, the leaders in Russia are still communists. The Communist Party of the Soviet Union underground controls the show. And this is what the defectors show us. And look at Russia is helping Cuba. They have troops in communist Venezuela. They're helping build military infrastructure in Daniel Ortega's Nicaragua. They're working with China. There's North Korean troops helping to defend, fight with the Russians side by side. These are all communist countries. And every communist country in Africa and South America is supported by the Russians. How is it that Russia is so deeply supported and mutually helpful to the communist bloc? Because they're still a communist country. I had a Russian historian correct me on this years ago.
So I'm gonna. I don't want you to think that I believe that the halls of debate are always good, and that knowledge is like iron sharpening iron. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
So explain this to me. I've been in 65 countries. I have seen everything from South Central America, Asia, Europe, the African continent. I've been to places that I've slept on the mud hut floor. I've been to some of the most opulent places you'd ever visit in your life, right? So I've seen it all. Actually, it's not true. I haven't seen it all. I've seen enough to have a really good representation of different cultures around the world. And I speak Arabic. I taught myself that so I could learn some things and not getting my head cut off.
Excellent.
It's a good start, right? So the things that you talk about with Russia being corrupt, remember when the fall of the Soviet Union and you had these, what came out of that was different countries. And, when you talk about the fact that Ukraine has a natural distrust for Russia, we can't ignore what happened in Crimea or what is underpinning for Ukraine. So you talk about the corruption inside of Russia. I spend a lot of time talking to people in Russia, in Ukraine, in Georgia, in a bunch of the different countries there. And And frankly, what we hear and what is written is completely different than what really is happening on the ground. And you have the Azov Battalion, which is a largely communist Nazi bloc inside of Ukraine that represents nearly 30%, 35% of their fighting force.
No, that's completely wrong. Go check that out. That is not true. The Azov Battalion, even if it's a regiment or a division, it's not 30% of anything. The Ukrainian military has dozens of brigades.
Yeah, so the report that came out from Ukraine in August of 2024 stated the Azov Battalion was its elite fighting force and represented, I think it was just under 30%. So that came from them. That was in August of 2024.
I don't know where you're getting this, but 30% of the Ukrainian armed forces is not Azov. That is absolutely not true.
Okay.
It's not. See, there's these Russian narratives. You know where the Azov movement started? It started in Kharkov, or Kharkiv, as the Ukrainians call it.
Mm-hmm.
And they were ethnic Russians. They weren't ethnic Ukrainians, ethnic Russians living in Ukraine.
Well, there's a lot of Russians and Ukrainians that live on both sides, right? They're brothers and sisters.
Look, it's split. The east of Ukraine is ethnically Russian. Now, those people are fighting against Russia now, too. And if you talk to the vast majority, look, President Zelensky was elected by a majority. He himself is a Russian-speaking Ukrainian. He's not he didn't grow up as a Ukrainian-speaking Ukrainian. And he was, I think, the first president. Yeah, it was the first presidential candidate in post-Soviet Ukraine to win majorities from both groups, both the Ukrainian speakers and the Russian speakers.
So why did he get rid of the?
Huh?
I mean, let's go back to 2022. Yeah. I mean, he's basically a despot leader at this point. I mean, he hasn't held the elections.
And he's elected, and he's following the Ukrainian constitution, which in wartime elections are suspended in their constitution. That's in their law. That's not something he arbitrarily made up.
Oh, okay, let's hypothetically say that that's true. It is true. So let's talk about what's happening in the 8-year war up till that point, and what happened in the election that happened in 2014, and the same systems that they've used to elect people over the last since 2004. Let's say 11 years, right? You have. I mean, do you think that Zelensky would be reelected if he ran for office again? I mean, he just literally unilaterally walked in and shut down any opposition media. I mean, Ukraine.
Well, in wartime, we did that. Every country that's being invaded does that, because remember, Ukraine was a former Soviet country. That's why it's got the corruption. Wherever you have state control over the economy, you have massive corruption. When you give police control over the economy, the police enrich themselves, right? It's just like prohibition in the United States, only 100 times worse. Who had the best bottle of liquor in Chicago? The mayor. Where were the police? They were on the beach helping Capone's gang unload the liquor from taking it from Canada, and putting their kids through college with the money. So it's whenever the police have charge of something economically, well, you don't just have the state in charge of liquor in the Soviet Union, you have them in charge of everything. So everything instantly got corrupted. So you're trying to get away from this system. So how do you do it? It's very difficult. It's like being possessed by a bunch of devils. How do you get out? How do you get rid of those devils? And it's been a painstakingly thing. But what I wanted to say this story now, when the Russians were mobilizing their forces to go into Ukraine before the Sochi Olympics, and you can go back and check this, and there was a leak from Moscow that basically President Lukashenko, who's really a stooge of the Russians, and you can object to that all you want, but it's a fact, he was supposed to provoke the Ukrainian people into rioting and causing civil unrest so he could invite the Russian army in. Okay. And so that's what he did. He beat up these kids. They were about to go home. A lot of them had gone home in Maidan Square in the middle of the night, and bloodied them, beating them up in their tents. They were about to leave. The protest was over. It was the Euromaidan protest. And this is what sparked outrage throughout the country, that these kids were beaten so badly, and people went into the streets. And it got worse and worse. And of course, just before, and of course, you can dispute this version of events. I'm sure you have a different one. Just before Lukashenko was going to call for the Russians to intervene, his own bodyguard said, "We're not going to protect you for this
Okay.
intervention." And because the whole country, they were sitting outside their houses, the president, the prime minister. So the president, the prime minister, all these people fled. And where did they flee to? To Russia, because the Communist Party of Ukraine and the Party of Regions were really Russian-controlled parties that were systematically fleecing the Ukrainian people. And so that Euromaidan revolution completely, it was a spontaneous thing. The people stood up against this. It was not a coup. I don't believe anything about this coup. The Obama administration's interventions, I think, were an attempt to help Moscow, not to really help the Ukrainians get independent.
Well, so I have to ask this question, Jeff. We can disagree. It's fine to
Right.
disagree.
Yes.
And so I want to. I always like to go back to moments where, of things that I know I'm sure of, right? So I
Right.
did study what happened in Ukraine, very closely, and I do know that the history of George Soros getting kicked out of Russia. I do know a little bit of some people that ended up in Ukraine as a kind of a hub spot, so to speak, and kind of even as you look at the what's wrong with my brain? The truce that was created with that Germany sat in the middle of the
Minsk.
The Minsk Accord. They, that she agreed. She later said that it was a ruse, and it was so that she admitted she did that it was a ruse in order to allow Ukraine to build up its forces. But I'm gonna set that aside because I've probably studied more than I should, and I do a lot of spending time on the ground. I want to put that in comparison to something else that I'm very, very well aware of, and that I have a knowledge that I think would rival any books that were ever written about what happened in a country called Sudan, right? And I know it's not related, but it is.
Sure.
You've heard of Darfur.
Yes.
And you've heard of, obviously, the genocide and ethnic cleansing in Darfur.
Mm-hmm.
So do you believe that genocide and ethnic cleansing happened in Darfur?
I don't know. I've never really, that's not my area of looking at, so I haven't looked at it.
So I use this as an example because there were many people that they had the comprehensive peace agreement and the East Darfurian peace agreement, or the East peace agreement, and then the Darfurian peace agreement. So these were all supposed to be implemented based on an indictment that was given to the UN by a person named Susan Rice. And she said that there's ethnic
National
cleansing.
Security Advisor for Obama.
Well, and has been involved in Congress on both sides, or been involved in the geopolitical, working with the UN for, you would say, Republican and Democrat presidents, right? So even up to, was fired just recently, and I think February of 2025 was taken off of a board that was closely related to what was happening in Europe. So when I went in, again, my job was to look at whether or not there was ever ethnic cleansing or genocide that exists in Darfur. In large part, my reporting came out of what I got on the ground by spending a vast amount of time there. Now, I had to go into countries that I would leave my passport at the border, and I'd walk in, and again, I'm there. I don't even know why I should be there. I shouldn't be there. I'm doing things I shouldn't be doing, right? And nothing illegal, but obviously getting to be able to see things that, frankly, most people can't see. And in large part, I did this based on faith initiatives, not on military initiatives. In other words, I didn't work for the United States. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I wrote this report, sent it to the UN, and it basically said, you're lying. Now, Jeff Pendergast and Jeff Norris were the two people that actually set up this thing called Save Darfur. It was about $3.5 billion. It disappeared. You have Jeffrey Sachs at Columbia University that set up this thing called the Millennium Project, 7 Millennium Villages. He was an expert on, he said, within a decade or 2 decades, we're going to eliminate poverty in Africa. Well, that never happened because the villages never existed. It was all a ruse. So you have ethnic cleansing and genocide. Books were written about this. I've literally sent letters to authors of books that wrote about the genocide and ethnic cleansing of Darfur, and yet it never happened. You had the Janjaweed, the Chadian rebels. You had 43 Darfurian rebel groups. You had the Libyan army. You had all sorts of areas that surround a sparsely populated area, which, by the way, had been intermarrying for thousands of years. So And you can say the same thing about what they did in South Sudan, saying that the Christians are being slaughtered. Again, another ruse that was just created by the United States. So I find it very
hold on. A ruse by the United States, but United States, not the letters USA. There are specific people who did this.
right.
This ruse.
And you're right. You're right.
Is people. So we need to be. I mean, as a political science person, we need to be precise, because if I work for the CIA and I rob a bank, is the CIA robbing the bank, or is it me doing it? Right. So we have to be careful, because I might be a KGB double agent. So going to George Soros, I asked the question, what if George Soros is really working for the Russians and pretending not? No, think about it.
No,
I've got sources saying that that's a serious possibility. Then you have to realize that when you invade a country, Russia is promised, and it's the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the Budapest Memorandum, to respect Ukraine's borders. Ukraine's a sovereign country. Russia violated that treaty. They invaded Ukraine. They invaded it by annexing Crimea. They invaded it. It was their troops. It wasn't an entirely an uprising in Donbass. Their Russian troops went in there. We know that. That's been documented. Now, the thing is that when you have a Russian-speaking Ukrainian city like Mariupol that's basically reduced to rubble, almost the whole city, 90% of it leveled, by a Russian general, is that the kind of thing that civilized world really wants to stand for? A country being invaded, its cities being leveled, its civilians being targeted. We know that most of the Russian missiles and bombs are not going at military targets. They're going after civilian targets.
So I would agree with you. Now, are all humanitarian crises created equal? In other words, does it matter what country we're talking about and the policies that we held in those different countries? Because obviously the policy has been to support Ukraine in this Ukraine-Russia conflict. Should we say the same thing about what has been done in Gaza, or can we even go back to 1996 when Madeleine Albright said, when asked whether or not the conflict that killed over 500,000 women and children was worth it? That's long before the 2002 conflict, and said, yes, I think it was. Well, 500,000 women and children died, and at our hands, and we were told
in what conflict?
In the initial conflict in 1992 in Iraq. And the policies that we put in place from 1989 all the way through till 1994, there was a lot of bad blood that was created. Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean,
that's why you want to avoid war if you can, because it always ends up with this horrible kind of thing.
But you can't forgive one without forgiving another and understanding the complexities of that war.
Oh,
someone had to gain, right? So, and you could argue what the United States has done. And look, I'm not against. I think what you said is really important.
I'm not a defender of U.S. policy. I don't believe U.S. policy is always defensible. It's often not.
Yeah, and I think that's my point. Is that I've spent the losers in all this are the millions of people that died, both the Ukrainians and the Russians, and I don't see any of the leadership on the Ukrainian side running to the table to actually create some sort of resolve. So, which becomes really problematic for me, because I tell people all the time, I'm for humanity, right? So if you're for humanity, you're for humanity. We'll get to the table and we'll figure it out. But
one objection.
Okay.
I'm not for humanity because humanity's too big and vague. I'm for my family. I'm for my community. I'm for my country. That is something concrete that I can be for.
So you're America first.
It doesn't. No, I didn't. Well, I mean, we all are. We all are ourselves first, right?
Yeah, I'm not.
You're for you first, right? You have to feed yourself before you're going to feed the world. You're going to starve yourself to make sure that every ounce of food that you could otherwise have gets to humanity first. I mean, that's not really.
I think there's a certain amount of selfishness that leads to a selflessness, right? So you can't not be selfish and provide a safe environment for yourself, and then you have to put your mask on first, right?
Right, that's right. When you're exactly on the airline, that's what you do. You put your mask on before you put your child's mask on. Exactly right.
So
No, that's right. And of course, family is where the unselfishness comes in. A baby is just a massive need that the parent has to work, change and feed the baby and so on, and raise the child. This is a major part of life. But and this is where, Plato and Aristotle had their argument. Plato thought all men could be brothers and all children could be the children of all parents. And Aristotle said, no, that's not right. The relationship of brother is a special one. He's actually my brother, my child. This is fundamental. So men are tribal and they're familial, and we don't want to try to say otherwise, because we're going to end up living in some kind of failed utopia, because that's what the communist experiment was. All men are going to be brothers, comrade, and they're not. And
yeah.
that
Well, you see in
reality
large
has
part
to be acknowledged. Yeah.
you see in large part that's happening in the United States as well. You could argue that this cancer that we have in our government has been consumed by fraudulent elections and a lot of really bad things that we've largely ignored, right? So we've let policy be created by people. You say they're not the CIA, but they've certainly done a lot of bad damage to the American ethos on our own soil, even though they're supposed to be operating, in the international stage in other countries, not here. So we've got some pretty serious problems in the United States, and I think that if we take, you're right. I mean, I should never have said humanity holistically, right? Because I think that's just a stupid thing to say. And so I said
Well,
it.
then you'll end up being a socialist utopian, if you
I'm not
keep
that guy.
talking that way.
Yeah, I'm not that guy. So, but I've spent enough time in areas and seen the fall of man, so to speak. I've seen a lot.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I've seen kids die of the common cold, get run over by trains. I saw a kid blow himself up. So I've seen stuff that you wouldn't want to see. And I say that from the standpoint that at some point you have to create an environment where there's a win-win. And right now, from a foreign and domestic policy position, not just in Ukraine, but around the world, we have created a we win or else mentality. And I'm not sure that what's happening and forget Ukraine and Russia, because I could learn a lot from you. I'm going to read your book. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read your book. I think that'll give me a pretty good idea of the way you see things. And I think you have 2 or 3 books. What's your newest one that just came out?
5 or 6. Well, my favorite one is, more recent one is The Fool and His Enemy. And it's a quick read. It's about 3 hours to read it. Yeah.
Right, so I'll read your books just because I don't agree with you on the Russia-Ukraine deal. And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay, because I can then come back to you and say, Jeff, here's what I'm thinking. Here's why I'm thinking. Tell me what I'm missing, right? And I think anyone that stands
I'm thinking like a strategist, and I want the United States to be preserved. And so I'm looking at these larger structures, what could cause our country to be destroyed. And the reason that, you obviously want to help people if you can, but you can't save the world, right? We're not all in business of being, America is Jesus Christ. We're going to go onto the cross for the world. You can't, that's not a foreign policy. Countries can't do that. But you see, if Ukraine goes down, Europe can't come up with as many veteran soldiers as Ukraine has now to defend itself. We don't want to fight in Europe a war. We're obligated by NATO. So it's very important for us to keep the Ukraine defended, to block Russia from expanding. And Russia and China are aligned. Whatever anyone says, they've admitted that they are. They're working together. There's lots of evidence for this. And if Europe goes, Japan will go, and U.S. will be isolated. Canada doesn't even like us, and Latin America. And you can look this up. General Laura Richardson, the Southern Command, 4 years ago, said that the Chinese and the Russians are all over South America, taking it over. And you just look at Lula in Brazil. They're taking over the whole continent. We're surrounded here in our hemisphere. If we lose our NATO allies, Japan, Australia, etc., we're isolated. We won't survive. We'll be destroyed economically and in every other which way. And
well, I mean, in large part, that's what's happening right now with this mass migration that's happening. And you talk about, Japan. Japan is being overrun by, you would. I don't want to say this knowing that my family's interracial, and obviously I don't care what race you are when you come here, as long as you come here legally, and that there's not a mass migration issue that takes away the ethos of a nation. Because once you lose your the soul of a nation, then and you lose your identity because you replace this replacement theory that they have inside of different countries. You can see what happened to the UK and so on and so forth.
I agree.
And in large part, that's happening all over the world, including places like Japan, which saw almost 100% surge in call them illegals, but migrants, and then all the people talking the same language. So the politicians are all talking the same languages. The only countries that aren't doing it is Poland, Russia. And I could walk through a couple of. They're the only ones that are holding strong, and the rest of the countries, including Ukraine, is allowing for this migration issue to be the people to come in from different nations and infiltrate their borders. And so I look at that, and I look at things mathematically speaking, and say, okay, there's more than this than it's just simply right in front of us. So let's get below the surface and let's start figuring out what they're doing globally, because it is global, in order to disrupt these different nations or nation states.
Yeah. Look, again, that goes to people who believe in this idea of humanity. We don't need Americans in America. We can have the whole world come and camp on our lawns, and we can share our food with them, right? That doesn't really work. The reason we have boundaries is because we do have different languages, history, culture, and that we want to preserve it, because when it becomes a mishmash, the basic structure, the fabric of society comes apart. And people, you look at Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia is a good example. Yeah, under Tito, he said, "You're not Croatians, you're not Bosnians, you're not Serbians, you're Yugoslavs." And these are people. They're racially the same. They're Southern Slavs. They speak the same language. The main difference between them are the grandparents of the Bosnians went to the mosque, the Croatians went to the Catholic Church, the Serbians to the Orthodox Church. Suddenly, Tito dies. This ethnic thing gets going. And one defector said the Russians were behind getting it going. They start recognizing their identity from where their grandparents worshipped. And here they've been atheists under the communist system, right? And I had a Bosnian Communist Party official tell me this. I don't know where this madness came from. He was a good communist comrade, and suddenly he discovers he's a good Catholic. He believes in this. She says, I don't understand this. And so they're murdering each other, right? And that's the only difference it took for them to murder each other, was where their grandparents worshipped. So think about how difficult it is for a nation to kind of form. It isn't, the United States of America. I think it was Thomas Carlyle who said that it took hundreds of years for Great Britain to become a nation. And America, he was writing in the 1850s or 40s, America isn't a nation yet. It's still forming. And America, he was writing in the 1850s or 40s, America isn't, right? I would point out is that we have basically undone the process of us becoming a nation, of coming together, right?
Well, I got to tell you, I'm going to have you on after I read your books again, so that I can and I may present some stuff to you just as food for thought. I can tell from talking to you right now, you will move me in a direction. I just need to, get more information. So the report that I talked about, by the way, came from a humanitarian organization that was closely connected to the UN. So I'm going to do some more checking on the size of the Azov battalion just to make sure that my math is good. But Jeff, I'll give you the last thoughts. Thanks for coming on. This was a lot for me to take in. And I saw your information on, Ukraine and Russia, or Russia and China being connected, and I was like, that checks. But so is the U.S. So I hope everyone takes what you're saying and it's a launching
And it's not
point.
that there aren't bad actors, and America doesn't intervene and stick its nose in wrong ways. It does. And you've got Gillespie, and you've got the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, that phone call conversation. But it wasn't a coup. That conversation didn't talk about a coup. It talked about giving advice to people whose government had basically fled to Russia, and how are they going to form a new one. And they were asking the Americans, stupid idea to ask the Americans, by the way, because the Obama administration they did the Russia reset, and they did the Uranium One deal, and they did help build the Russian Silicon Valley project. I think we gave them $3 billion, was it $2 or $3 billion for that? So, and it's very funny. You have to be suspicious when the entire left in America, the Democrats, who have been friendly to Russia and the Soviet Union beforehand. You look at Senator Ted Kennedy going over there and schmoozing with the Soviet leaders and telling them secrets, and then you have Senator Biden leading a delegation in '79, and this is from this is in the files that Bukovsky, Vladimir Bukovsky stole out of the Communist Party Soviet Union archive, that it was a Central Committee document saying that, well, Biden tells us he has to speak against the Soviet Union, but he's really our friend.
Yeah.
Right. When he was on a trip there. So all these people compromised themselves with the Russians when they were senators, when they were in office. And of course, just because you're compromised doesn't mean they control you. When Bill Clinton, and you can look in the Clinton archive there, but it shows the degree to which they go to compromise our leaders, whether it's Trump or it's Biden. I think they're all in some degree compromised. But when Bill Clinton, who I think was definitely compromised, went to meet Boris Yeltsin in their last face-to-face meeting in Istanbul in December of 1999, Boris Yeltsin asked him, and you can check the Clinton archive, the transcript is there of the meeting. Yeltsin said, Bill, I still believe in you, but there's one thing you have to do for us. You have to give Europe to Russia. It's right there in black and white. And Yeltsin.
But I thought that was a joke. I thought that was a joke. I mean,
that is not a joke. Read the transcript. It's not a joke. And then
but I thought that they were laughing over it. I thought that was a point of. I mean, it's a point of contention of several books that they talked about that conversation specifically, and that it was
this conversation was classified until 2018. This was classified till 2018.
I need to read more. I could have sworn I read a book about this specifically, and it said that they would jab at each other. And I am not an apologist for.
Yeah, they did. No, they were when they were in Vancouver. There was a funny thing where they were up hugging each other and laughing and making each other get into stitches. But no, this was something that was kept secret. That Russia was basically demanding that you Bill, you go over and you defend these countries over here, and we'll defend those. And Bill Clinton said to him, he said, "But Europe doesn't want me to give them away to you. How can I do that?" And then Yeltsin says, "Look, Russia is a European and an Asian country, and I'm sitting in Moscow. It's a European city. Europe is something we should be in our sphere of influence." And then Bill Clinton kind of snarky said, "Well, now you're going to control Asia too because you're partly Asian."
Yeah.
And Boris Yeltsin was frustrated at the end of that, and he said, "Well, there's going to be a new leader then, and his name is Vladimir Putin." And this is when,
let's have this conversation again. We got to get on to the next segment. Jeff, thank you. Thank you for coming on. How can people follow you?
jrnyquist.blog, and my book's on Amazon.
Your books are on Amazon. I bought one. I just told them to buy the other 3. So 4, excuse me. They found 4 more. So I will become, I promise you this, by the time you hear from me in the next couple of weeks, I'll have read all of your books. And then I'm goofy like that. I like.
No, it's good. It's important. Yeah, reading. That's the only way you'll really get to know.
I read a lot. I'm kind of a geek when it comes.
And you go in person and you go to the places.
Yeah. Well, I've been to a lot of places. So God bless you. Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for joining us. We'll have you on again soon.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Yeah. So this was a testament to the fact that you don't have to agree with everything. I am going to dig into it because I think I owe it to Jeff. He is a scholar, and I'll read his books. I don't agree with his take on Ukraine, but who knows? I'm not an immovable object. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Mark Cook. Let me just tell you about this. This is going to be fire because Mark's pissed and I'm pissed. And frankly, the gig's up. And we're going to talk about Eric Coomer. We're going to talk about the election systems. And we're going to talk about what it is we're going to do next. Something's about to break. And so we're going to talk about that. We'll be right back. In every thread, in every stitch, Honor Bound USA weaves the fabric of the American spirit. It's not just apparel, it's a testament to God, family, and country. At Otterbound USA, we're a family of patriots who put our faith, family, and America first. When you visit our website, you'll find a line of products that embody our commitment to pray, stand, speak, and act. As the official site for the Untamed podcast, all of our products proclaim speaking the truth with courage. We also have the powerful documentary from Professor David Clements, Let My People Go. Identify yourself as one of the few who are willing to stand for what they believe in. Join the Honorbound USA family today. Wear it as a badge of honor, commitment to the values that shape us, and a pledge to the bright future we will build together. Because when you're honor-bound, you're not just wearing a brand, you're embodying a lifestyle.
My first time here shooting at the shooting range.
How's it going? It's also my first time, and I'm really excited.
It's also my first time here, first time shooting guns.
My day off of work, and they were like, hey, want to shoot some guns? That was awesome. The revolver is crazy. I will definitely come again.
Yeah, it was awesome. Really cool experience.
100% bringing my friends here another time.
I like to come shoot because I get to spend time with my family. The same for me. I love spending time with my family. It's something to do.
It's a lot of fun shooting.
When I first moved back into town, the first place I came was DCF Guns, and I signed up for a membership right away.
I got into shooting because of self-defense. I would encourage all women to be ready and to feel comfortable handling a handgun.
This was my first time ever shooting at DCF West. It felt amazing. I shot an AR-15 and it was amazing. It was powerful and I loved it.
I'm here today as a part of a group of women that support one another in continuing to practice and refine our knowledge.
Not only self-protection of ourselves, but protection of our loved ones as well.
I have fun and I get to meet with other ladies.
You should always be prepared to defend yourself.
And I love coming to DCF Guns West to shoot. I come with my family. It's a nice, clean, friendly range. Here I feel safe. I feel like the people to my left and my right are also really cognizant of their range etiquette. That's why I come to DCF Guns West.
Come join the DCF family today, where we keep the range hot and the deals hotter.
Gabe! Gabe!
Dude, Gabe, something's in the dumpster.
Whoa, what is that for?
Something's in the dumpster, man.
Well, let's use the burner. We don't want to wake the neighbors. Freeze! Stop resisting!
Stop resisting!
If you're looking for a less than lethal option for self-defense or keeping pests out of your dumpster, then check out Byrna at DCF Guns. Visit us at our 3 locations in Castle Rock or Colorado Springs, or visit us online at dcfguns.com.
Come join the DCF family today, where we keep the range hot and the deals hotter. Oh. Okay. Part 1's down. Part 2's up. You want to fire, you're going to get it. So I'm going to go ahead and just bring Mark on. Before we do, GoCo. Good sponsor for us. And I've been answering questions. I'm not a financial advisor. I have done well with precious metals. I have a whole bunch of silver coins that I'm going to give away here at some point, but have nothing to do with GoCo, just because I want to show you that I have a bunch of these silver coins. But yeah, go to untamedgold.com. You will not be my thoughts on where gold and silver are going and why this is going to be a good investment for you are well known. But go and just get the packet. All I want you to do is get the packet. You can go to untamedgold.com. You can go in, put your information in. It's a free packet. Go get the free packet. Start there, right? They're going to send it to you. And then to be a part of this program, you're going to get some free incentives as well, some added incentives. So untamedgold.com. Call 844-960-GOLD. Let's go over there. All right. Mark, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
Mark, On Saturday morning, I put out a report. And I was going to take the time and read the whole thing on here. I still might. But you read the entire report, did you not?
I did.
And I sent it to you in its raw form before I sent it to anybody else. I sent it to you and a bunch of other people. And I wanted to make sure it was peer reviewed. So I wanted to make sure the information I had was right, that it aligned with what was really happening, that I could. And so I did that. And the feedback I got was thumbs up, Joe. Everything in there is not only defensible, it's absolutely true. And I was like, okay.
Okay.
But I did it without emotion. I tried to take out as much emotion as possible and just get to factual basis. That's very difficult.
It is. Yeah.
Because for 5 years, it's been a fight. And so I go ahead. Tell me what you think of I'm going to show everybody your tweeted response, but initial thoughts.
Well, there's a whole lot more going on than the citizens understand. And that's what really frustrates me. A lot of people have believed the real manufactured lie, and half the country is at each other's throats, all because of a bunch of lies perpetrated by a small group of people. And one of these people is Eric Coomer, at the center of a lot of this. And I cannot stand liars. I freaking hate them. And there's been so many people that have been hurt, horribly hurt, relationships destroyed, lives destroyed, futures destroyed, just because of some evil people that couldn't care less about what's right, what's honest, or about their fellow man, but only are there to take advantage and cause harm to people. These are the demons that are among us, sadly. And this Coomer is one of them. And I am very happy to be in a position where I can help you and others expose the lies of all these people, because the American citizens deserve a whole lot better than this. The world deserves better than this. And we can't allow ourselves to be taken advantage of by this small group of people. I'm not saying they're stupid. They're actually incredibly intelligent, but very evil and intelligent. And we have a system here that they have set up, unbeknownst to most American citizens, most people in the world, that allows them to covertly manipulate this system that we use to measure our will. And so we are living in a society, we're living in a world that is reflective of our will not being accurately measured in our elections. So we truly don't have freedom. We have a facade of freedom, and it's all perpetrated by people such as Eric Coomer, who have no problem lying straight to our face and the face of other law enforcement as well. So
yeah, but
I'm ready to take them all down.
It went further than that. See, Eric Coomer poked the bear. He poked me. And he continues to poke me with his lying little lawyers. And so I'm in the process now of filing criminal complaints. That's my next step is, what they're doing to me personally is it's a 5-year crime spree. Right? That's what they've done to me. They came after my family. They caused all of this by creating this charade of I didn't do anything wrong. But I want to take you back in time on this. And let's put up the original, if we can, put up the original tweet that I put out. Everybody understands what I'm talking about. X thing. Let's put it up next to us, if you would. Oh, well, the Substack doesn't really, I put it everywhere else. So let me read it to you. And by the way, I figured something out too. I figured out who's on our side and who's not on our side. I sent it to about 200 influencers. A lot of them called me back and said, holy crap. Let me post it. So they put it on their socials. They talked about it on their podcast. They did a bunch of stuff. Then there were others, Mark. What'd they do? Walk right past it.
Yep.
Because Con Inc. Now, I know a couple of them that are lawyers, and so I got to be careful because they're working on it. So I wanted to make sure they had the report. They couldn't post it because they have to make sure that they stay completely above water on it. But they made comments to me in private of here's what I got out of it, and that is awesome. Like that was ridiculously well written. My report number 2 should lead to indictments, and my report 2 should lead to some indictments. I'm done. You want to see a guy that's done? I'm done. I'm done.
Gloves are off.
Gloves are all the way off.
Yep.
But this is a crime spree. And so what I wanted to do when I did this is I wanted you to know, I wanted people to be able to see for Eric Coomer, for who Eric Coomer is. And if you killed a bunch of people in 500 different places, and every single time, let's say they didn't know it was you, but you were the only one that flew in and flew out in all 500 bodies, Mark flew in, body drop, and they were all stabbed the same way. I'm sorry, bro, you're my guy. So the same formula we used, that's it. The same formula that you would use for a forensic audit, if you were looking at the IRS for someone that was stealing or cheating on their taxes, same thing you would use in the case of embezzlement, the same mathematical theories that you would use in order to find predictively whether or not organized crime was operating in certain areas. The same thing you would use in order to get to a place where you have an ironclad, this is the guy that committed the crime. That's what we did in this report. Okay? Let's go back to 2004, shall we?
Let's do it.
It was December 13th, 2004, and a guy named Clinton Curtis. He testified to Congress. And he was told to build a system that could cheat in elections without getting caught, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he built it. And the person that asked him to build it was a congressman in Florida, right? Feely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That was December of 2024. March of 2025, Smartmatic buys Sequoia Voting Systems. Right?
Right around there, I believe.
April 2005, fresh off of heroin boy Coomer. He gets a cold call out of nowhere. Now, keep in mind, he was building websites. He was building websites, Mark. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, building websites for businesses. He's not building any architecture. He's not doing anything. And they pick up the phone. They're like, "Hello, yeah, this is Sequoia Voting Systems. We want you to come do some elections for us. We want to make you our chief architect." 17 states and the District of Columbia they operated in. Oh, look at those people. I see those people behind you. Oh, look at that guy.
Oh, let's see if I can keep myself here. There we go. Yeah. Have you seen this site?
No, what is this?
Stolen Elections Facts, FACTS.com. It's your full timeline of the whole thing, all the companies involved, all the individuals involved.
Stolen
Elections.
Elections.com.
Stolen election facts. So I'm gonna put it here so you can get it on the
here. Just
on
get,
the screen.
Get it up
I'll
on
put in the
screen
chat.
with us. With him. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
There you go.
Stolen election facts.
Elections facts.
Elections. Stolen elections facts.
You got it. Two plurals.
Two plurals.
I think you'll appreciate the work done here.
Yeah, so this goes through, should concern all Americans to have lost control. Okay, so you put this in perspective. What page were you on, though? What page is it behind you?
Go to individuals at the top.
Yeah.
Then down to Dominion voting systems.
Okay.
Click on that, and that's the page I was on.
All right, Mark. Yeah, there you go. Let's go up a little bit. So you have John Polos, founding president, CEO of Dominion Voting Systems. Dominion is now in 150 municipalities, and we used a couple of used in a couple of province-wide elections, including most polling stations in Ontario's 2010 election. Dominion also had technology in 1,000 United States counties across 35 states. Polos has grown the company through direct support to elections in Mongolia and the Philippines. That's not the only one, so. Jack Blaine. Now, this guy was the original guy who was the president and CEO of Sequoia. He had multiple positions, and he stated that for all practical purposes, the only company other than Sequoia with which SVS had any significant involvement was Smartmatic. Maintained business relationships with its former owner. Now, you remember CIFIS? They had a 2007 hearing and said, you must sell because of a 2006 election. So keep going up though. I want to get to the other. There's Eric Coomer. You don't have anything written about him. What's going on?
Well, I'll say this isn't my work, but I'm sure we'll make sure that it is fortified with the proper information.
Okay. All right. David Moreno, know all about that guy. Okay, so here's some stuff that he's an engineer integrator, Smartmatic's SaaS solution, and the Sequoia product line. Letter integrator for Dominion Voting Systems, being responsible for the warehouse production and testing of the products and solutions that are deployed under the election. Wow.
Moreno is a very interesting fella. I'd like to know a lot more about that.
I have some stuff that I can show you. Matter of fact, it's going to be report 3, because we're going to be then uncovering some things that you guys should know about, especially had to do with what's happening in Venezuela. Now, what's interesting is that there's currently an arrest warrant out with a $50 million reward for a stolen election, right?
Mm-hmm.
What system substructure do they use there?
Smartmatic?
Same one for Smartmatic. Same, identical. Same substructure. Okay. So here's where it breaks down though. Go ahead and put on there if you can. And then I just want to know your thoughts on this. If you could put up on the screen the Substack. Eric Coomer, from drug addicted Satanist skinhead to the heart of election controversy. Now, I started this out by saying, are you ready for this? I'm going to do a lot of this. I've had enough of the bullshit. The part you are not going to get in this report, of the couple dozen Venezuelans from the 2006 Genesis, 3 became whistleblowers in 2020. 1 was murdered in 2022. That will be a story all in itself. So much for perfect villain. No, I'm pretty sure he is the villain. Is a villain.
Okay.
So we went through this, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. I may actually do a show where I do read the whole thing so you can hear all of it. But in April of 2005, fresh off of his being a drug addict, heroin addict, dry heaving on the ground by his own words, right? They asked him to become Sequoia a month after they bought Sequoia from Smartmatic. Now, he did websites. That's what he did. He did websites. He did not. There was no grandiose thing that Eric Coomer was doing. He was not like deep in the middle of building infrastructure and doing great things. He was a drug addict that was headed to prison for a long time. Am I wrong?
But with a physics degree.
With a nuclear engineering degree, not a physics degree.
Nuclear engineering. Boy, it's pretty incredible. Not many people have a nuclear engineering degree.
So, no. And then he wrote a thesis. Do you guys have the thesis back there? Oh, I'll send it to you right now. So what I did, Mark, is that over the last 5 months, people have talked about the fact that you have PID controllers inside of it, that it had to be a complex algo, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you saw the work for Ed Solomon. He did some really solid work related to the cast vote records in over 30 counties.
Brilliant.
Right?
Brilliant. And there's a lot more coming too. Basically, it shows with the county results. These are the results directly from the counties. If you know how to look at them, you can so easily see that the results that they provide are absolutely synthetic fabrications. There is no way that these could be organic. They're very tightly controlled synthetic fabrications. And I doubt most of the counties even know this, because if they knew it, they wouldn't be releasing the data. Or if they do know it, they didn't think anyone's smart enough to be able to see this. But the work that Ed's doing is absolutely brilliant. And I'll tell you what, if there's any mathematicians out there, I don't care what side of the aisle you are on, just take a look at the data. The data speaks for itself. Wait till you see it. You could be the hardest core leftist in the world, but if you are an honest person and you understand some basic math, I mean basic math, your eyes will be completely shot straight open when you see this yourself.
All right, so let's talk about that for a minute, shall we? Why this can't get this to work? Ugh.
I know a tech guy.
You do?
I do.
I'm trying to just get this one document to allow me to drop it in there. All right. So what I did is I took and I worked with some other non-Ed types, and I asked Ed to send me some data, and he sent me some data, and I walked through it with him, and then I presented that data. And I wanted to make sure that it would pass muster. So then I sent it to other people and said, okay, I need you to peer review this. Does it work? And they're like, yeah, it does. But how do you know that the data is real? And I was like, okay, here's where the file came direct. Chain of custody came right off the site. By the way, this is where they changed it in Arapahoe County. And they also started changing it in other counties, but this was prior to that. And here's where we got the data. So they all said the same thing. Joe, if that's true, and I was like, I need you to talk me through the complex algorithm that would have to be created. And this is 5 months ago when I had this, Eureka event.
Yep.
And I go, why would they hire a drug addict? And I know his dad worked for the Pentagon. I know his brother worked for General Dynamic, was involved in the war machine, that there's deep connections in this environment. So I'm like, okay, well, that would influence it. But here's you have a guy that could not pass a background check. Could he?
Not a chance. But luckily, Dominion probably doesn't do background checks.
Not Dominion,
probably
Sequoia.
Wouldn't
this
have
is Sequoia.
Even Sequoia. And we both know who worked with Eric back in the day at Sequoia too. Happens to be a neighbor of mine.
Speak.
Chris.
Mm-hmm. York.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. He worked with Coomer back in the day, and saw a lot of this stuff. Didn't quite connect all the dots, but certainly did a little bit later. Absolutely.
Yeah. And he's been a huge help as well. He was one of the first people to come forward to say, this is how they did it. They eliminated log files. That was before, by the way, he was on with me before we ever had an audit and found out that this was true.
It was way early on.
See, this is the part where I say it's going to lead to indictments, because the timelines are tight. Like I'm tight on my timelines, right? And Coomer went to work for Sequoia. What was his job title?
Lately, VP, chief architect back in the day.
Yeah,
I think that was Hyder Garcia's job title, possibly at Smartmatic.
Okay.
Hyder's kind of the Smartmatic version of Eric Coomer.
Mm-hmm. And where's Hyder now?
Hyder actually goes out. They keep putting him in all these different election departments all over the country.
Right.
And now, I don't know if you hear what happened to him now.
Yeah, he left and went to go work for ES&S or something.
Hart. So actually, he's in. Right. So he's under investigation for election fraud. Then he's in another country altogether. He's asked not to leave. In fact, about 10 other people were under investigation. A bunch of people from Smartmatic and a few from Commission on Elections. And all of a sudden,
Dominion?
Hyder disappears, ends up in Placer County, California, running the elections there. And then Tarrant County, Texas. And then Tarrant County turns blue for the first time since 1964. And then he leaves there when someone starts looking into him a little bit more, and then ends up at the federal EAC. I mean, someone at our Federal Election Assistance Commission actually hired Hyder Garcia, who's under investigation for election fraud in another country, somehow misses that background check and gets hired at the federal EAC as a consultant. And then to Dallas County, Texas, botches that 24 election, and then just quits, I think, a couple days ago. And wouldn't you know, Hart InterCivic hires him to replace Peter Lichtenheld, who was the vice president of customer success that a few years ago, when I was in Kerr County with him, testified that every system's hackable, and especially if you have access, knowledge, and time. And look who they hire. I mean, you just can't make any of this stuff up. It's so incestuous, insidious, and I cannot wait to put it all together, connect the dots for the American people.
But
and I do feel there are going to be a massive amount of indictments.
Why did it take me putting it by 5? I mean, I'm not the smartest guy in this room. I'm a system architect. So, I mean, I guess it would make sense that I architected the timeline and looked everything up and spent time making sure that it all added up. And bro, I reached out to people in governments that Eric Coomer was there. Like I've reached out to, I want to talk to the president of one of these countries, ex-president of one of these countries. And there are people that are willing to speak with me. And they're like, oh my gosh, you need to know about this guy. And I'm like, okay, tell me more.
It slipped under the radar. So many, if people had just communicated and shared that information, absolutely, for 16 years. So it's complex. So most people don't even understand this domain because they don't understand it. They're reticent to share anything about it because they're too afraid that they might be wrong about something. So because it's a domain that most people don't understand, they don't talk about it. And it's hard for them to put it together. Then you've got people that are just too scared to say anything, and people that are in on it. People that are benefiting from this, I'm sure, are told to keep quiet. So anytime someone does squeak a little bit out, I'm sure they're quieted up pretty quickly by those that don't want the public to understand what's going on. But yeah, these people have raped not only the American citizens after all these years, but they're raping citizens in all these other countries as well with these electronic voting systems and these small number of companies that are doing it. And I don't really care about how vulnerable their systems are. I know how vulnerable they are. I don't really care that they're, how they're being manipulated. Really, it's much simpler to me. The citizens are not in charge of their own elections, full stop. I don't have to talk about vulnerabilities. All I know is the citizens don't have control of their own elections, and the citizens use the elections to control who they represent or who represents them and what laws they have to follow. And so if the citizens don't have control over the very system of measurement, we're done. We're done with that discussion. That's why we have no choice. We just need to rip all these systems out and go back to something that the citizens have full control of. Again, full visibility, full control, full verifiability. But I'd love to put the whole mystery together and hold everyone accountable too that did this, perpetrated this upon the American people and the people of this world. And nothing would make me happier than to see them held fully accountable for everything that they did to all of us. And that's why I'm proud to do it.
All right. So I need to, and what you're saying is absolutely true. Let me see if I can find the other one real quick. Well, that's the exponential decay. That's where it came out. So, so I ran it through all these tests, Mark. So with people, I want to say mathematical people. And then I came back and I said, okay, what's the probability? What would it look like? And so I started using some of the systems that we have on the AI side that we built in with Athena and said, because I want to use my own system first for a lot of reasons. And then I wanted to be able to have a big enough number of counties and states and a control. So there are some cities that have no fraud.
There are. Absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
And so I had to find 4 counties that had no fraud, right, in different states that use the same substructure. So it had to be ES&S, had to be Smartmatic, or had to be Dominion, and that they were good. Like you get the cast for record, you get the information, you put it in the system, and it says, yeah, this is the way people are supposed to vote, right? Now, fast forward. Actually, that's not true. So these aren't people. They wasn't just Dominion. I used like Clear Ballot was one. I just needed to make sure that the election was real, right?
Yeah.
And that it didn't follow any, it looked real. It acted real. I guess I should say, could it have been fake? Yeah, but this is what the law of large numbers and what happens over time with a group of people.
When people look at the data of the election, you see the trend of votes over time.
Yeah.
It either looks natural and organic in nature, or it looks controlled. And if there are patterns in the data, that's how you can determine that the thing is controlled. It's the patterns, because when normal people vote, those patterns really don't exist. Those patterns look very normal. It's random votes coming from different areas. You'll see a little bit of consistency when there are other variables that are linked with each other, but you won't see really tightly controlled patterns. And that's when I've looked and seen this data and seen the corruption in these different counties that have corruption. It's very apparent because they didn't do a real clean job. They didn't try to make the manipulation of the data look organic. There are inorganic parts of it that you see very unnatural patterns in the data, and that's the telltale sign. But they're going to get better. And these new systems, all these new upgrades that they forced everyone to employ, and they sold these 10-year contracts to these commissioners that didn't know any different. They told them, well, we save a lot of money if you sign a 10-year contract for our software, and we got to do this update right now. I'll bet all these new variants of these voting system images are probably going to be even better. They probably have a more natural looking manipulation built into them, if they do have something built in. But how would we know? Because none of us are allowed to actually see under the hood and see what the source code is.
Okay, so I needed to be inside of this document. I needed to be able to take what you're talking about, and I needed to have a control. And then I needed to be able to run it against and say, is this natural, number one? And if it's not natural, does it follow the same? I took Eric Coomer's doctorate dissertation, right? His thesis. I plugged it in. I plugged in all the cast vote records one by one, then collectively in 6 counties in 4 states. Okay. To show that the system structure, if you take it and you turn it sideways, was the same, right? So you could see the way that the system was operating. By the way, I also found an anomaly within CITL and how information be carried up to CITL and whether or not that handoff happened. So I found some other, that'll be like, I think, report number 4, which would be, how does CITL play a part in this, and what do they know?
Big part.
Yeah, so I think they do know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I put that together, and the R-squared value was 0.995, 0.998, 0.997, 0.999, 0.995.
Explain to people what the R-squared value is.
So let me break this down to you in such a way that you understand it's determining whether or not something is. Sorry,
it's a correlation.
It's my wife.
Yeah,
it's the true north of information. So if the information, again, we can get into the science.
So if it was a 1,
yeah.
If it was a 1, it'd be dead on.
Dead on.
Completely dead on. So basically, you're comparing data with what data would look like if manipulated.
So here's,
and the closer it is to that, is closer to 1.
So here's how we use it when we aggregate data at my company. we use it to say, all right, we spent money on these 4 platforms. We have what's called online and offline attribution. So you'd say, all right, I'm going to spend $10,000 on Fox News, right? And you do time correlation within 15, 30, and 45-minute increments, which is why this R-squared value, this determining factor, tells me, okay, I spent $10,000 with them, but I also spent $5,000 over there with, say, Google, and I spent $3,500 over here. And let's say we got 100 customers to say, yes, we want to buy it, right? So you'll use this to tell us how effective the campaigns were in each one of those environments based on a number of variables that come through the system. And then it tells us, and for a campaign, you want it to be above 0.7, right? Above 0.7 is a pretty good number. 0.71, I think, is the number we use. And so you'll continue those campaigns. As it starts to erode, then you can literally throw that out and it says, okay, we're not going to, it doesn't have a correlated return. Something else will rise. Does that make sense? I mean, did I explain that right in such a way that you think people would understand it?
I think people will get it. Yeah.
Okay. So when you get to 1 or 0.99, that means that it not only correlates, it's the same. In other words, here's the question that I asked is, does the theories that Eric Coomer have in his thesis, does it align with the algorithms that are used and the math used in the elections? And once the people said, holy shit, these are different. I mean, one's dealing with plasma decay and things like that. The other one's dealing with votes.
Mm-hmm.
But the theory of how you get to the math is the same. Okay? The math is the same. So why would they recruit a drug-addicted skinhead who can't keep himself out of jail and can't stop doing drugs, and by the way, still has the same problem today because he ran into a building, ran away from it, died, lied to the cops, went into a bar, drank a couple shots.
Controllable.
Yeah.
Controllable, no scruples, doesn't care. And so when they profile,
that's the guy you want.
He's perfect. That's the guy you want. Absolutely.
CIA. It's funny though, in November, early December 2020, you know who showed up first here to visit with me?
Nope.
Chuck Sam Faddis, CIA stooge. That guy, the one that, kind of walked around and talked to other people about how the election was stolen, and turns out he was in the middle of it too. So
a lot of people have been.
Here's a guy, chief architect, and you go, Joe, that's smoke, but that's not the fire. You don't have any proof. Bullshit. This is the same system they use to catch people, Al Capone like figures. They use to catch people that are stealing from the government. This is the system they use. This is how they come to the conclusion that there's a problem. Okay? But that's not where it ends. That was 2005. He went to work for him as chief architect. 2006 was the first election in a municipal election in 2006 in Chicago. Guess who they flew up from Venezuela?
Who?
A couple dozen Venezuelans to be the support for the election. Couldn't have anybody in the United States. It had to be Venezuelan.
An interesting thing that Chris told me about when he was at Sequoia is that they frequently flew up a group of Venezuelans to do the programming to Denver. They flew them up to the Denver building. They didn't speak English. They just flew up there. They did a bunch of work for quite a while, weeks or something, and they were gone. Isn't that weird that for a company that handles elections in the United States of America that was recently deemed part of our critical infrastructure, national critical infrastructure, that this company would think it's perfectly okay to fly Venezuelans into Denver, Colorado to program the voting system that the United States of American citizens depend on, and now in a company that handles about 41 or 40-ish% of the votes across our entire country in very strategic states and counties. Mm-hmm. It's odd, isn't it?
Very odd. Yeah. That 2006 election was highly contested. Glitches. They always say glitches. Oh, it's just glitches. Isolated
human error.
Isolated
Just
human
a
error
glitch.
glitches, isolated human
Right.
error glitches.
Yeah.
The job is to count votes. 2006, 2007, they handed over to managers. Blaine was one of the managers. It then is sold in 2010, 2008, by the way. That was when Blaine came in. Guess who's a part of it all the way through this? Every glitch, every problem. By the way, there's a ton of other elections in those 17
I'll
states.
bet
that were
Eric
problems.
Coomer.
100%. Fast forward to 2010. Let's go to Mongolia. This is where it starts to really heat up. The person responsible for going through all the election systems in Mongolia is who? Eric Coomer.
Is it Eric Coomer?
Guess what happened when the election in Mongolia?
I'll bet it did go well.
It went horribly. Flip
What a
votes.
coincidence. Was there a glitch?
There was a massive glitch, but then Smartmatic sued Sequoia, right? I'm sorry, sued Dominion because they were collecting information central information in Mongolia to the election.
That seems odd. Kind of like how Dominion has offices in Serbia.
Well,
that during our elections and their support actually for our clerks across the United States of America
we're in Serbia.
Is actually over voice over IP phones out of Serbia. And the sad thing is our clerks have no idea that when they call in for support in Dominion, they might be talking to someone in Serbia supporting them during a United States election. It's pretty crazy.
Bro, what's even crazier is that the number of organizations that were tied back to Dominion on both sides and Sequoia and Premier, that they basically would sell off the IP, merge into something else, and then quickly bankrupt that organization. Okay? So Sequoia Voting Systems was bankrupted in 2014 after selling. Now Smartmatic got to keep the IP, intellectual property. They'd shared it. So that's the first deviation. Now Smartmatic has it, and and Sequoia has it. Sequoia sells to Dominion. Now Dominion has it. I want to point out that $120 million was given by the Venezuelan government, by Hugo Chavez, that funded their ability to buy Sequoia, a U.S.-based election system in the United States. Now, Mongolia was an unmitigated mess that led to a lawsuit with Smartmatic and Dominion. They're at each other's throats. More for show than anything else. Then what happened in 2012, 2013? The elections in the Philippines. What happened during those elections?
We got a great
disaster.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Now, who was there?
Was it Eric Coomer?
Uh-huh. Yeah. 2014. This is the only unverifiable report that I have. You had the Maidan coup in a country called Ukraine. The substructure of that election system shared in part what?
Let's see. I'm going to cruise through here on the master timeline.
Yeah.
As well. While you're doing this, I thought this could be cool, except my head just disappeared. Let me see. I'll fix that in a second here. Let's, there we go. Yeah. I'll make some adjustments here, but let me get up to 2012 on the master here, because I think you'll really appreciate going through and lining up what you've got with this. Okay, here we go. What month now in 12?
Well, we're up to 14, the Maidan coup in Ukraine.
14, okay, so here we go. Got it. Jack Blaine's.
Jack Blaine files for Sequoia Voting Systems bankruptcy. Yeah. And he writes an affidavit. By the way, I have that affidavit. That's gonna be one of my reports as well. Brennan, what does it say?
Brennan Center raises concerns of voting machine vulnerabilities. September.
Yep.
Then Smartmatic CEO announces SGO Group with Mark Malik Brown as the chairman.
We need to fill in the part about what happened with Ukraine in the Maidan coup and the stealing of an election in there. Right in the middle.
Well, we'll get this fortified. Yeah,
bro, it is so connected to
all
information. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Look, if you read that report that I wrote, by the way, I'm still in a lawsuit with Eric Coomer right now. I mean, he's still keeping the facade up. But if you go through this,
I mean, they're going to go down. I mean, and of course he's going to keep it up. He's going to do everything he can because he's going to be cooked here real soon. They got everything to lose. You can't just give in. Yeah.
So this is the unverified report on 3/13/2025. That's the last part of me not getting it verified. I'm still in the middle of someone that was there, and I just want pictures. So what I take pictures and or corroborating evidence that would put him there on the ground. I have some of it, but not enough that I feel confident yet. So 15 to 18 bribery in the Philippines indictments in 2024. This is all during Coomer's work at Dominion. Dominion Serbia data center built by roaming networks. I have all the documentation related to that. That was their data center. It was built in connection with Huawei, which is the bank in China. There was a big customer of roaming networks.
There it is right there. Dominion brings talent from Belgrade, Serbia, right there.
Yeah. Smartmatic proceed in Philippines for changing source code. Okay, so here's an interesting part about this entire thing. Since 2009, how many times do you think that they had reviewed the source code for Dominion voting systems? That somebody had gotten into the source code?
Who's they?
Anyway,
they who?
I mean, testing it.
Anyone?
Yeah.
I doubt our testing labs are probably not getting the source code.
Yeah,
I highly doubt it.
Since 2009 that they actually reviewed the source code?
0.
0 times.
Yeah.
Validated 0 times. So up till 2020, they had never. They would review and they would check and the functions, but they would not have access to the source code.
Yeah.
Now that was and that's not Clay Parikh. Although I did send some out to him, he didn't answer me. That's other people.
No, the people at the testing labs, all their job is just to test the software to see if it works. And when they actually examine the source code, from everything I could find, the only thing that they've done, and I don't know how many times they did this, maybe only once, but they put it through a source code syntax checker, and it looks for all bad syntax and common programming errors, but no one is evaluating the logic in the source code. And so everyone knows what that means. The logic of the source code is what the code actually does, what the program does step by step. I have never seen any evidence that anyone other than the voting system vendors has actually evaluated every single line of that source code to see what the program actually does. And that is a massive problem because most people think, oh, well, of course they test it. Of course someone looks at it. Great. If they do, prove it to me. Let me see some evidence that someone's actually done that, because Dominion source code alone, the last count I saw, was 2.1 million lines of source code. Okay, so you tell me how long it would take someone to look through 2.1 million lines of source code. Let's say you had a book that was 2.1 million lines long in a book. How long is that going to take someone to read that book if it's in plain English? Then take that plain English and make it computer source code, which takes a lot longer to read those lines. And you tell me how long you think it's going to take anyone to go through 2.1 million lines. I don't think you'll be able to find someone to go through all that in less than a year or two.
How long's a root kit?
It's not being done.
How big is a root kit?
Well, it could be a couple lines. It could be it could be less than a line.
Is there such a thing as self-deprecating code?
Of course. Yeah.
So what?
So everyone knows it's code
what a root kit is.
Basically changes itself.
Yeah.
So a rootkit is it's like a virus, but it's a much more advanced virus. And what it does is it embeds itself before the operating system even loads. So most viruses, traditional viruses, load within the operating system like other programs. A rootkit loads itself before that in a different area of the computer that normal programs that would scan for viruses cannot see. It cloaks itself and then loads everything else after it. And it sits in this hidden layer that you can't see. So viruses were out for decades. And then all of a sudden, these really, really advanced came out, and that was called a rootkit. And there were no tools that could detect the rootkits because they can't be detected while the system is running. The only way to detect a rootkit is you have to examine. You have to turn the operating system off. You have to boot into a different environment to examine the contents of the hard drive to see what it is that's actually loading. And that's if the rootkit's on the hard drive. If the rootkit is embedded into the BIOS of the computer, then most bets are off at that point because you have to use really specialized tools to examine rootkits that are integrated or born into the BIOS itself. So it's no one is going to be able to find these things. And if someone's really skilled, even the best of us are not going to be able to detect them.
Okay. So rootkits, possibility in how they could be used in an election.
Of course.
Yeah. Now this is where
but they wouldn't even need it. If no one's evaluating the software, if we're not evaluating the source code of the software, heck, they could just put it right in the source code. The other place that a lot of people don't realize they could easily put it in, which is if I was a bad guy, it's where I would put it in, is in the stored procedures in the databases. Because these election systems, for instance, Dominions relies on a database when they set up the election. That database holds all the information about the election, all the choices on all the ballots, and it's not part of the source code or not part of the software that's tested necessarily at all when it goes through the testing labs. However, there's a very interesting thing about these databases. They have what's called a stored procedure functionality, which means it's an area in the database where you can embed additional programming, custom programs that aren't part of the testing of the system and never would be because they can create them after the fact, after everything's been tested, after the system even goes through the county logic and accuracy tests. Anyone that touches that system that, for instance, programs the election or does something else to it can get in and modify the stored procedures. It's like a special hidden program that gets injected after the fact. And that hidden program that's right in the database that no one ever looks at can do anything it wants to any of the votes or any of the components within the election. And it can then change itself and delete itself, and there's no trace of it. So that's where I would do it. I do it right in the stored procedures. That way, no one would be looking at it. When all these poor little counties contact Dominion to program their elections because it's too complicated for them to do themselves, and Dominion only charges about $2,500 to do it. Well, Dominion could actually program that election database that they then send the county to put inside their system. They could embed all that right in there, and the county wouldn't have the slightest clue.
Okay. So I think it's important for people to understand that we came to the conclusion based on using cast vote records that mathematically it aligns with Eric Coomer's doctorate thesis, right? Perfect.
If you're getting in R squared that high, then it looks like the same type of manipulation that you would get using that concept that Eric wrote his thesis on. It's very interesting that it correlates that closely to the type of manipulation we're seeing in the cast vote records. I would say it's probably not a coincidence.
All right. But that's a correlation.
Mm-hmm.
Correlation doesn't mean causation.
That's true.
So then you have to run it across multiple states, and then you have to run it across ones that are not stolen. Mm-hmm. So that'll show you that a normal election would look like this, and these don't look like that, right?
Right.
And these actually align with those codes, with the algos, and that only someone with advanced knowledge of algos would. So they chose this guy in 2005. They put him in as a chief architect. His job was to actually create a system that used those algorithms in order to write a program that allowed you to basically control the outcome. Then his job over years was to make sure that other election systems use that base source code, right? That base structure, which there was a connection between ES&S, a connection between Hard-Enter Civic, there's a connection between Smartmatic, and there's a connection between Clear Ballot. They're all connected.
If someone's figured out how to hide manipulation within electronic voting systems, it's reasonable to expect that a majority of the companies that are there that would be interested in being able to manipulate results would use those same concepts, because the whole goal is to be able to manipulate it in a way that people can't see it.
Okay. So that's 2 points of correlation, right? Determinative correlation. Okay. Then I had to take in the Mesa counter reports. And I had to say, does this align with it? So I have cast vote records. Now I have the Mesa reports. And I have the Antrim County reports. Oh,
speaking of the Mesa County reports, are you aware? Do you ever see the data about the 914 ballots that allegedly, based on the data, were scanned into the system for the November 2020 election in Mesa County in 32 seconds? I think. Did you ever see that?
Impossible. Yeah, it's a part of the time deal in the article.
32 seconds. Well, it's a little different than the report, but here it is right here. If anyone is curious, this is it right here. This is the 2020.
This is what they said was caused by time drift.
Well, time drift would never cause this. What they've got, so everyone understands what they're looking at here. These tabulator ID number 10 is tabulator number 10. Batch IDs, these are the different batches of ballots. These are the load orders, so the order they were loaded in. This is all in order from 1 to 10. And these are the creation time of these batches. Each of these batches has about 100 ballots in it. A couple of them are a little bit less than 100. Well, here you go. Ballots 100, 42, 100, 100, 100, 99, 100, 100. So it's odd this one only has 42, but check this out. This is the crazy thing. Look at the creation time of each of these ballots. These right here all happen in about 4 seconds.
What's the normal time it takes to actually scan a ballot?
Boy, it would take, these scanners can only do 100 pages per minute at their maximum speed. And these are doing 100 ballots in a matter of seconds. So there is no way that this could actually happen in real life. There's no way those scanners in Mesa County, Colorado could ever have scanned the pages fast enough to get all these batches in here. It's physically impossible for the
what's going to happen, Mark?
Gone through
You're
the
going to help me finish my third report and part of my second.
Yeah,
because I missed.
And this is kind of the elephant in the room here. That tells me right there that data was injected into the database directly. There's no way it could have physically come from a piece of paper. And the other very interesting thing, and this is Jeff O'Donnell put this together here. I'm going to pull this up here because you got to see this graph. This is crazy. Let's see here. It is this one right here. And I'm going to minimize that. Check this out. Okay, well, let's see. Let me move this window over. Sorry, I got it here.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, check this out here. Okay, look at that right there. So these are the same batch IDs here. Look at this, 4001 through 4010 right there. And if you look right here, you can see this is 10/19/20 right here, right? Oh, let me fix that. 10/19/20. Those 10 batches right here, check this out. Those 10 batches is right here. Notice they all showed up at exactly the same time in 32 seconds. There's 914 ballots. And look at the distribution. Just about exactly 50-50. Just about exactly 50-50 ratio, even though the ratio is far different later on in the election. In Mesa County, it's like, I think it's high 60% Republican. But these ballots that could have never showed up organically, actually scanned, showed up here with exactly a 50-50 ratio. So what that tells me is they're stuffing the denominator. They're feeding in, they're preloading ballots with a near 50-50. So that way, when they start the manipulation as they move on, then it doesn't make as big of a jump when they've already established 914 ballots to start. This is just impossible. I would love Dominion to explain exactly how that happened right there.
Yeah, but
that's one of the many questions I have for them.
They won't. And this is where you get into.
But I really want them to.
Yeah, I know that. I know you want them to. Yeah. But if you look again, if you go through this and the election logs that were lost, how they turned down the ability for them to record the election log, or excuse me, the machine logs, and that was
the
done
machine
on
logs
every part. Yeah, I mean it's
in the database inside Dominion's database. They actually turned off transaction logging on the databases themselves. So they could have turned that on, so any change in the database was tracked. But for some reason, I guess maybe they made a glitch while they were programming, and they accidentally didn't enable that tracking. Oops. And then they accidentally left the firewall wide open to all IP addresses in the world. Oops. Oh, and they accidentally had a web server running right on their system. And oops, a bunch of reports that connected to the database that's on there that wasn't in any of the instruction manuals, and none of the election officials even know about.
How about the recordings of the investigators from the AG's office that tried to strengthen debunking the Mesa County Report 1, 2, and 3 with, they're just lying, knowing that they weren't lying, and also knowing that the system did exactly what we just tested it against. So, I mean, look.
Absolutely.
If you go down and you look at the reports in not just Mesa County and you run those against the reports in Antrim County, and then you run them against the report, even the flawed report that came out, the initial report, not the one that was redone by the lawyer for the Senate, because it was rewritten. So Logan's
Maricopa.
information in Maricopa was never seen by the public. The only thing that's saw by the public was the one that was rewritten by the lawyer for the GOP. Right? For the Senate. Right?
I'll say Doug Logan. I know him personally.
Yeah, whatever.
He's a good man.
Get out of here.
He
sent me, listen,
and he's honest. Yeah.
He sent me the report before the report got published that said these elections are stolen.
Yeah.
He then, one day after sending me that report, recanted it and said it wasn't a report that was it wasn't a report that was sanctioned, and completely threw somebody else under the bus when he was the one that provided it.
There's more to that story.
I was there.
But I
was there. I literally had the conversation, and that he was deathly afraid. He has 11 kids.
He's deathly afraid. Yes, absolutely.
He is what you just said. And by the way, anyone that's deathly afraid should have never got that contract. But that contract was decided at Lynn Wood's house, and who was going to get it in November, late November.
Why do you think they chose Doug?
Because they knew he was a paper tiger.
Well, they knew that they're going to choose someone that has a bunch of kids, right? They always choose the people that they think they can best control.
Well, he's going to have to step out of the deal now and answer some questions.
Give him some time.
Well, he doesn't have time. Mark, come on now. I mean, you said this to me before, and I was like, all right, I'm going to take a walk, because I've been working on this for 5 months, and I had to make sure that I had Coomer dead to rights, and that there was no way that no one would hire him. He couldn't pass a background check to work at McDonald's, and all of a sudden he's working at the 17 states and the District of Columbia running elections as the chief architect. And he wrote.
Kamala worked at McDonald's, didn't she?
Maybe they met there.
Yeah.
Maybe they met there. My point is that they've tried to destroy my life. They have, and now I'm just pissed. Now I don't care. I got nothing to lose, and I'm coming out with everything that I got. And you should see the stuff I learned about their attorneys. That was fun. I mean,
it's all dirty.
It's all dirty.
It's all dirty. It's all incestuous. It's as disgusting as you could possibly imagine. The hardest part is going to be putting it together in a format that's digestible to the average person, because it's so gross and it's so big. It's so overwhelming. It's hard to grasp all of it. But the American people are going to have to start paying attention and realize that it's going to come out. And what you're doing to bring it out, what I'm doing to bring it out, what everyone is doing that's brave enough to stand up, that just has nothing to lose and doesn't give a crap at this point, we're going to have to bring it out. And we may have to bring it out for those that are still too scared and that are too worried about their families. We may have to shoulder a little bit more for it, and hopefully that they will gain some courage. And if we can get the right protection for those around them, I hope we'll have plenty of more whistleblowers coming out.
Yeah, I think that's where it really comes down to, is that we have some other whistleblowers that are getting ready to come forward, right? And both in the U.S. and there's some really big things that are happening, but where it all starts is that we got to put it in place and write reports that are indisputable, that you can say this is absolutely. Oh, what is that?
Was it Mugica shows Obama voting on a Smartmatic machine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was, by the way,
there's a lot more coming out with Obama.
He was indicted for what happened in the Philippines for putting bribes out there.
There's so much that the citizens of this whole world are going to learn soon.
Yeah, so that's why they hired Coomer. That's why they hired Coomer. They hired Coomer for one reason and one reason only, and that is he's actually smart. And he knew how to build the system, and he was at every crime scene for the last 16 years.
Yeah, and Coomer is not a stupid man at all.
Unfortunately, we're not stupid either. For him,
that is very true. Yeah, let's see here. One of Coomer's very, very intelligent comments.
Yeah,
these are my favorite here.
Yeah, is Eric Coomer saying we suck?
We suck, and we are so broken all over the place. And so when I go around telling people that Dominion sucks and Dominion is so broken all over the place, I love the fact that I'm actually agreeing with Eric Coomer of Dominion, Director of Product Safety and Security. Doesn't that give you a lot of confidence? All these counties that are spending all that money, all their citizens' tax dollars on these systems, when the Director of Product Strategy and Security says right there, we are so broken all over the place and we suck. Boy, that's a great ad. You guys should sign a 20-year contract, even better.
What's the title? This will blow your mind. What's the title to it? ICP modems do what?
ICP modems failing acceptance testing. Yeah, these are the modems, inside the ICPs. See, if the citizens probably don't realize this, but they've built all these computerized voting systems to really have centralized control over elections. And so, although Dominion screams for years, our systems aren't connected to the internet, they're not connected to the internet, they are all designed to be connected to other systems and to the internet. That's the whole design premise of them. In fact, back in the day, in the Sequoia days, the software used RAS, which is routing and remote access services. So they had banks of modems, and they would modem in, they'd modem the results, and then Sequoia would actually connect in to the county election systems from Sequoia headquarters to get in to make changes. I've even got an internal email from someone up at Sequoia that they had to make a change to one of the county systems, and they were trying to determine whether they should tell the clerk or not. I mean, and they easily had these connections. And I'll tell you, the RAS, the stuff is still built in. I still see, when you examine the system, I could show you internally, they have all this information. It's still programmed with those capabilities inside the Dominion voting systems, at least 5.1 and 5.13, probably 5.17, because these guys are such idiots. They're smart, but they're also idiots. And they're so sloppy, and they're so brazen that they think that no one's ever going to look at this. Yeah, but you should see the stuff I've got. Let me pull up another image. I think it'll be real fun for everyone here. Go ahead. Let me look this up.
Yeah. So, Mark, you wrote an X response. I want to put this up if we can. At least put it up on the other side, so I can read it while he's going through this stuff.
Yeah, you can take me off full screen. That's fine. It'll take me a second to find this anyway.
Are you guys hearing me in the control room? Are you guys hearing me in the control room?
Control room went to go take a leak, probably.
No, there's multiple people. Control room. Help me, control room. Okay, so can you do me a favor and put up Mark's X response to my post? So Mark came out like fire, pissed. And you also picked the wrong effing fight with me. I'm going to join Joe and come at you like a wrecking ball. You lying psychopath, God-hating criminal demons. Can you go ahead and mute yourself? And hurt hundreds of millions of souls. I'll slave away my entire life working nonstop so I could devote my later years to helping others. You took that from me. You stole that time I will never get back, and you destroyed the resources I was going to use to help others. I will now destroy all of you in the most excruciating nonviolent way you could ever imagine. So that's Mark, by the way. And Mark, you are an expert. Oh, there's more. And I will work with everything I've got to return elections to the people so we and every future generation will actually live with freedom and liberty. I pledge allegiance to our republic, and I will do all that it takes to protect it. You mess with the wrong effing American, and it won't be just myself and Joe. You have woken the sleeping beast and far more of us. And as the beast of real, true, God-given freedom in millions of Americans stretches after a slumber and takes its first deep breath, you will feel what's coming your way. My fellow Americans, it's time. Start leaning in to hand count your ballots now, because we will be doing so now that we are taking our elections back. That's handcountroadshow.org/a-count-able. Whew. It's a lot.
It's a lot, but that's what has to happen here, man. The citizens of the United States of America have to actually be free again. And it's so easy for them to become free again. And when we take back control of our elections, we run them ourselves. We count our own dots. We get our own results at the precinct on election day in person. We count where cast immediately when the polls close. No more funny business. When we remove the control mechanisms that have been plaguing our elections for decades, we will suddenly have a country that actually reflects the will of the people. That's what will give this country back to its people. That's it. It's as simple as that. It all comes down to that. And then we'll take care of all these a-holes after the fact. But right now in this upcoming election, this is critical stuff.
If we don't get rid of machines and mail-in ballots now, I'm under pretty good.
We got to do it right now.
I'm under pretty good information that there's going to be a lot of things moving in the last next 30 days or so.
So I mentioned the web server. This is one of the other things. There's so many things in this image. I spent a lot of time examining these images. Just so everyone knows, I was one of the lead forensic examiners on the Tina Peters case. I've spent a lot of time staring at these images, and I started making a list of all the concerns I had in it. But I'll tell you what, the list got so big, I was making a list of everything I saw that was wrong, every oversight in security or common best practices. And it got so long, I realized it probably would have been faster if I had just made a list of what they did right, because I have thousands of screenshots of issues. But I want to show some people some of this, because I bet no one's ever seen this before. This is from the web server built into the EMS server. This is an internet web server built into Dominion's web server, or Dominion's voting system server. This is where the database lives. These are the reports that they've got in there that the clerks, election officials, have no clue there's a web server running on this thing. And they have no clue that there are reports in this web server, and they're running on an unencrypted port 80. So that's the HTTP, not the HTTPS. Super safe and secure for our nation's voting systems.
Mark.
Yeah.
Are you an expert in this?
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah, just a little bit. So look at some of these reports here. These are some of the hidden reports that are in these systems that our election officials have no clue about. But I want to just cycle through. I want to pull some interesting reports up that I saw that were kind of shocking. So I'll just go through some of them here. And I don't know why Dominion would have these types of reports available to them when no one else even knew they were there. There's one, let's see, hide portion. I don't know why they're hiding things in the reports. They've got, let's see here, report title, RCV method. So lots of ranked choice voting capability built in there. They've even got some information. Let's see here. Hide unresolved write-ins. Count unresolved write-ins as undervotes. It's got a percentage field to choose percentages in the report. Place where you can choose the database that you want to get into. Let's see, hide unresolved. There's some modem stuff in here too, which is really interesting. There's device settings, show voting location, number of precincts, programming groups. You know, these hidden reports are real interesting there. Let's see here, tabulators, number tabulators, latitude, longitude. Why are they keeping track of latitude and longitude and building accessibility in the database for the voting system? Not to mention toilets. If they have toilets in the voting location, that's an odd thing. Wonder why they have that. Let's see here. We got, is that the last part of it? That may be the last here. And there are some that talk about modems and internet connectivity, tabulators, number tabulators, show blanks, show written overrides, number tabulators. Look at all that. Very interesting low-level stuff that they're able to pull these reports directly from the voting system. I'd like to know why. I'd like to know why they have all this information about.
Well, I don't think that gives us any. There's anything nefarious they can do with pulling those reports. I mean, I guess I could technically, but
absolutely, absolutely,
you could pull information.
Pull a lot of information, and if they can pull information from the database, they can make changes to the database as well.
By making sure they can take care of the log files. Then
Absolutely.
Make changes and you would never know, which is what Chris York talked about long before we had any sort of an analysis or reports from there. Well, Mark, I got another report that'll drop on Friday.
Okay.
That'll be report number 2. And then I'm going to report probably Wednesday or Thursday. I may drop just the math behind all this. I'm going to work with Ed Solomon. I'm going to call him later on tonight. But basically just put a pen in it so that people can know that, hey, you can do this yourself. You want to run these reports yourself? You know, you can use any of the platforms, any of them. Now, I will tell you that all of the AI platforms that weren't our own said that it was unauthorized to do the comparison until you made it scientific. Like, do the comparison scientifically, because it'll tell you unauthorized access.
Yet the AI systems have been programmed not to allow the citizens to use that technology in order to determine if elections are rigged.
Yeah.
And so they've actually got protections built into them to keep us away from that. So you have to play some tricks with them so they don't think they're looking at election results to be able to ask them those questions. And that alone is disgusting.
So you see that Blitzacorp at the very top, the 2000 Blitzacorp?
Let's see here, right here, that guy right there. Yeah.
No, it's keep going.
This
up.
one?
Keep going up. Yeah. So that's the incorporation. No. I'm sorry, go down. So that Blitzacorp, they keep going one more down. Incorporated Delaware. There, right down, straight down a little bit. There you go. Acquires Blitz Corporation of Delaware. Okay, let me just tell you about this. So Blitz Bizda gave money to Sequoia, $200,000 note, owned 28% of it. Said it was a loan, but never paid it back. Like there's so much in here that when you start to go through it, if you were the DOJ and you're like, oh, this doesn't make any sense to me, you put it into just basic information. Here's who did it. Here's the information. Now go fill in the gaps. It should be really easy. Like they should have an indictment already. The fact that people haven't been indicted means that somebody is in on it. Because I shouldn't be here 5 years later talking about the same thing. I shouldn't. All these people should be in handcuffs, and we should be hand counting everything, and we would have a totally different government. Totally.
We don't have a choice. We have to do that right now, because we would have a different government. We'd have a bunch of different laws. All the people that are in government right now, I'll bet most of them shouldn't even be there. I bet 100%. For the past at least 2 decades, we have had people show up, not just federal, local too, local, state, all of the above. There's so many different ways to manipulate this system. We are probably being represented by people that we never elected. And so when a citizen sits there and goes, how on earth could this be happening? How could this person be in that position? I can't believe people voted for them. Well, they likely didn't. We likely didn't vote for them. And then all these unjust laws that we're living by. Good people live by laws, bad people don't. Rules for thee, not for me. All these laws we're living by. How many of those laws were created by these manipulated elections? How many of these laws were actually not laws that the citizens agreed to live by? I think we're living a 90% fraud, at least a 90% fraud in everything.
Then you start talking about what happened in the elections. Then, I mean, let's be honest. If we're having a conversation about that, the next thing you have to do is say, okay, all this makes perfect sense. Now they know, even the people that are there that we didn't elect, they still have to do the right thing.
Yeah.
But they're doubling down on it.
And a lot of people are wondering, well, how did certain people win? Like, for instance, how did Trump win? If the elections are all manipulated, how did Trump win? What they're doing is they're not just running totally fully synthetic elections across the board. They still have to make it believable. And if the people don't believe it, if the people realize that the magic trick is just a magic trick, then they're going to throw the whole system out. So what they need to do, these psychopaths, they have got to keep the system of illusion in place, because as long as the people believe that it works, then the people won't get rid of it. So their goal is keep it in place, make it as believable as possible while still being able to manipulate it. If they just manipulated it 100%, it would become less believable to the citizens, and then the game would be over. And that's what happened when Trump showed up. And that's why they can't stand the guy, even though I love the guy. He showed up and threw a massive wrench into their plans, not because of who he is, but it actually happened because so many people went that way. So many people, we had an election that was so imbalanced that they couldn't sway the idea, the illusion enough to make it believable. And in 24, of course, they could have just stopped counting in the middle of the night and stolen it, stuffed all the ballots in like they did 2020. But they couldn't do that and get away with it without people realizing it's all BS. So that was a strategic move on their part. They bet, okay, well, let's let Trump win right away. We'll steal all the down ballots and we'll try to neuter him for 4 years. So this is
what's going to happen going into 2026.
Absolutely.
It's going to swing
fight a lifetime right now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
it's absolutely going to, and they're prepping to do it right now. And all these things that we're seeing are distractions because they wanted the entire election integrity reform movement neutered. They wanted our nuts cut off with the Trump win, and half the people did disappear when Trump won. They just started high-fiving and they disappeared from the movement.
More than half.
Yeah,
and more
that's
people
exactly
moved
what they
on to
want.
the other grift. More of Con Inc. turned into just a bunch of grifters, right? So
yep.
Yeah.
And so that what we have to do is that those of us that are left that actually understand what the heck's going on here, we know that our entire country is hanging on by a thread right now. The freedom of every future generation of this country, the United States of America experiment in self-governance is about to crash and burn if the citizens do not reclaim control of their elections in this upcoming election. That's why we absolutely have, and people need to just realize it, suck it up. We have our elections. The ecosystem is totally irredeemably compromised. There is no fixing it. We have an elections national state of emergency, period. It is that critical. And that's why we need to have immediate actions taken to address the elections national state of emergency that we have right now. And I hope the right people realize that, because we're not going to get another opportunity here. Extreme measures must be taken to put the elections in the hands of the people.
I think we're headed there, but we have a lot of judges and a lot of bad people that we have to fight through. So, all right, Mark, we've been at this for almost 2 hours now. So I'm gonna let you go. Let you kind of get to your thing. I'm way past it. For those of you that are listening, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and more. Be the ones that's the ambassador of truth. And Mark, I'll catch up with you later on this afternoon. Thank you. It's exhausting. I got to tell you, it's exhausting. Like doing this and saying this, it's like saying over and over again that they're raping us, right? That the British are coming, the British are coming, the British are coming. I'm doing it for 5 years. I was sitting here thinking about it and I'm going, man, I'm tired. And what they did to me is different than what they did to everybody else. See, they sued everyone around me. I would go talk to Mike. They sued Mike for defamation. He sued Mike for defamation. I'd go to Clay Clark event, sue him, and make it so I can't get on the stage. Anything to keep me quiet. All the social platforms, Rumble included, right? What did they do? They came in and like, we're going to take you off the map. We're going to make it so people can't see you. We're going to make it so that we completely neuter you. And there are certain people that are like fixers that walk around and say, hey, take him down. Take him down. Don't let him have his voice. Make it very difficult. And they did. They've spent even more time over the last 6 months doing that. And then they had judges like Wang that says, in limine, and says you're not allowed to talk about anything having to do with anything Eric Coomer. No one's allowed to know about him. And then you start looking at the other things that they did, and you're going, this can't be real. I got a $90,761 deal for Eric Coomer, $91,000. And a case that I'm not even a party to, for attorney's fees for using the system to appeal. And a case, by the way, where his lawyers are on contingency. So they just made up a rate and said, we're going to give the judge or give him 90 grand. You can't make this up. You can't make this up. And then I get attacked. So my report's coming out, man, I'm just going to start slaughtering people. Slaughtering them. Eric Coomer is not going to, I've got a whole mess of websites that I'm putting up there. I am literally going to walk door to door with pieces of paper about Eric Coomer in my reports, and I'm going to walk every neighborhood, and I'm going to put it on every single person's door. And then I'm going to tell other people, hey, here's the paper. Go ahead and make a copy of it and pass it out everywhere. Why? Because if technology is captured, and it is, I mean, I got guys that I used to talk to all the time. And it's not just the left. They've slandered me so much that the people out there are like, oh, Joe talked about wanting to kill people. I did not. I said they should be hung by their neck until dead. I didn't talk about killing them. I talked about justice and the fact that you committed treason. You should lose your life for what you've done to the American people. And if you don't like it, I'm sorry, but that's the consequence for treason. Sedition. But the left uses it, do whatever they want. But they've attacked me differently than they've attacked anyone else. You name one person that they've done what they've done to me. They sued, Sequoia and all those guys sued Mike Lindell, right? Not Sequoia, excuse me. Smartmatic and Dominion. Did Dominion sue me? No. And if they sue me now, okay, I'll just represent myself. At what point does it get to the ridiculous where you have Staple Street Capital? You have all these companies that they basically can silence any one of us that they want. And I wrote a report. It got shared 250 times in the first 20 minutes. Reached 30,000 people. Then 40,000. And then they basically shut it down. I had guys that shared it that had millions of followers. No one's allowed to see it. And you say, well, it's the algorithm for X. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's someone putting their finger on the dial and saying, don't let this be seen. And every time we turn around, that's what we get. It's not a conspiracy or a conspiracy theory. It's a conspiracy against the truth. I'm not going to stop talking about it. And I'm not going to stop fighting. Yeah, it's good to be back. All right. Well, I'm going to pray us out. You had me for too long tonight. I'm going to put out some other reports and other stuff, so stay tuned for that. And you are the ambassadors of truth. You're the only ones that can share, right? And that's why we're on every platform. I got more platforms that we're getting ready too. I had a platform called Q Broadcasting and all these different. I'm like, look, I'll just put it out there, no problem, because they literally want to steal everything that I'm saying and say, we're gonna cover it up. I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm that big of a threat. Oh, Susan Rice, good Susan Rice, good to see you as well. Thank you for coming out, guys. Jeff, Chris, Gammy, Paul. All right, let's go. Father God, thank you for having us, and thank you for first guest. A little bit challenging, he has a difference of opinion. Got a little agitated when I started to question him, so I let up on him, Father. But that was grace, I think, more than anything. But Father, I just ask that you not only give me, but give Jeff the ability to be movable in our beliefs and to validate the things that you believe, and to bring it to you when there's question. Father, help us that we may be patient, but also be strong, that we may stand up for what's right and not necessarily what's popular, and to seek you and seek the restoration of you to our communities, to our country, and to the world. Father, I ask you to help us in this adventure of getting to the bottom of all of this fraud that we deal with, the stealing of our voice and the ultimate enslavement of the people, of your people. We're grateful, Father, for the things that you have given us. And we lay that down in front of you and say, Father, what is it that you would like us to do? Help us, Father, we may always listen and follow the path that you want us on, not necessarily the one we want us on. I say these things humbly in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. All right. I'll see you guys later. Same time, same station. Tomorrow at 2:00. I won't go as long. Sorry. I am going to do some stuff on locals. We're trying to figure out some stuff. And so I'll get you guys on, let you ask some questions, do some behind the scenes stuff. We'll do some great stuff. So I want to call in and pray. I'll let you do that, Jeff. We may have you do that. It's going to be good. All right. God bless you all. See you soon.